When I was 23, I worked the late shift at an electronics store in a mall just outside Denver. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid a little better than the earlier hours, and it let me go to community college in the mornings without killing myself. My hours were 4 p.m. to midnight, Monday through Saturday. Most days were the same. People came in, wandered around, asked about Bluetooth speakers, and sometimes bought the expensive display models we weren't supposed to sell. Nothing about the job was really memorable, except for this one guy. Every Thursday around 9 p.m. without fail, this middle-aged man would walk in. He looked like he was in his late 40s, tall but slouched, with thinning black hair and a long coat, even in summer. I started calling him Thursday Guy in my head because I never knew his name, and he only showed up once a week. I didn't even notice him much at first, but after a few weeks I started to pay attention to the stuff he was buying. It didn't make sense. He always paid in cash, and every time, it was the weirdest combo of stuff. One week it was a kid's tablet, a pink pair of over-ear headphones, and a phone charger for a Samsung from like 2016. Another time it was 2 power banks, a pair of adult headphones, and one of those talking toy dinosaurs for toddlers. Random crap. No consistent brand, model, or even age group. Sometimes he bought stuff that felt like it was for a woman, sometimes for a man, sometimes for kids, but never all from the same department. Like someone had given him a list, but a vague one. And he never asked for help. Barely said a word. Just handed me a pile of boxes, waited for me to ring it up, and handed over a wad of bills. Always exact or close enough that I didn't have to count back much change. After about a month, it started to bother me. Not enough to report it or anything, but enough that I started watching for him. Thursday. Guy was always quiet, always in and out fast, but the randomness of his shopping bugged me. It didn't look like someone buying for family. It looked like someone trying to act like they were. And I don't know how to explain it, but there was something about the way he moved through the store. Not slow, not fast, just unsure. Like he didn't want to touch anything unless he had to. Like he didn't know what half the stuff was for. I asked my manager once if he thought the guy might be buying for a resale scam or something, and he just shrugged and said, "Cash is cash." So I stopped asking, but I didn't stop paying attention. Then, one Thursday night in early September, everything changed. It was around 9:10 p.m. when he came in, right on time. I was behind the counter fixing a price tag that kept peeling off the tempered glass and just glanced up when I heard the sensor beep. Thursday. Guy walked in like always, coat buttoned, eyes forward, no smile. But instead of going straight for the shelves, he came over to the counter. That was new. He started picking up stuff from the impulse bins, battery packs, charging cables, phone stands, and putting them down again without really looking. I waited, figuring maybe he was going to ask about a return or something, but then he looked up at me and asked, "So, you work here every night?" His voice was dry, like he hadn't used it in a while. "Pretty much," I said. He nodded, still fiddling with a portable speaker. Then he asked, "You ever get vacation? Like, do you go anywhere?" I tried to smile. "Not really. I'm in school, so this is kind of my break." He nodded again, faster this time. "That's smart. That's good." Then he licked his lips. It wasn't like a normal lip lick, like when your mouth's dry. He did it twice, quick, and his eyes darted toward the front of the store, like he was checking something behind me. I started feeling uncomfortable. His hands were shaking a little when he picked up the toy dinosaur we kept near the register for last-minute gift buys. He flipped it over, didn't even look at the price, just dropped it on the counter. Then he added a cheap phone, one of those off-brand Androids we kept for emergencies, a set of headphones for kids, a pair of women's earbuds, and a universal car charger. I rang it all up. He didn't say anything else. When I told him the total, He handed me a folded stack of 20s with one hand, still looking toward the glass entrance doors. I counted it automatically. It was too much. I started to tell him, but he just shook his head. Keep it. I froze for a second, but said thanks and put it in the drawer. Then I expected him to leave like always. He grabbed the bag, nodded once, and took 2 steps toward the doors. But instead of going out, he stopped. Just stood there, right in the vestibule by the glass, and looked outside. At first, I thought maybe he was just checking the weather. But he didn't move. He kept staring, leaning slightly to the side like he was trying to see around the edge of the entryway. I went back to rearranging inventory, watching him from the corner of my eye. After a minute, I realized he wasn't looking at the sky. He was watching the parking lot. More specifically, the cars. I pretended to be sorting through a box of HDMI cables near the window, so I could glance over without being obvious. His head shifted every time someone walked by. When a couple walked past pushing a stroller, his eyes followed them until they disappeared out of sight. Then he stared at the row of cars again. Not all of them, just certain ones. A red sedan, a gray SUV with tinted windows, a beat-up minivan parked in the back row. He didn't blink much. At one point, I saw him adjust his coat slightly, like he was checking something in his inside pocket. His hand hovered there, then dropped. My manager was in the back on his break, so I was alone up front. I thought about asking if everything was okay, but something told me not to. Something about the way his feet were planted, not casual, not relaxed, like he was bracing. He stood like that for almost 10 minutes, just watching. I stopped pretending to sort and just kept my eyes low, checking every few seconds over the counter. My shift ended just after midnight. I clocked out, grabbed my bag, and stepped into the empty mall corridor that led to the back parking lot. It was always the quietest part of the night. Most of the shops had already been dark for an hour, and the cleaners were still on the other end of the building. My footsteps echoed too loud in the tiled hallway. I pushed open the glass door that led outside and walked toward my Honda Civic, parked in the far corner like always. I didn't like parking that far out, but by the time I came in at 4, those were usually the only spaces left. I saw him as soon as I stepped off the curb. Thursday guy was standing right next to my car. He wasn't moving, just leaning slightly against the trunk, one hand in his coat pocket. I stopped walking. We stared at each other for a second before he stood up straight and took a step forward. "Hey," he said. "Just wanted to talk." My keys were already in my hand. I didn't answer, just walked toward the car like I didn't hear him. But he kept talking. "You said you were in school, right? What kind of stuff do you study?" I hit the unlock button and reached for the driver's door. That's when he grabbed my shoulder. Not hard enough to hurt, but not gentle either. "You need to come with me," he said. "Just for a second. It's important." His voice had changed, lower, firmer, faster. His grip tightened slightly. I didn't say anything. I just twisted away, shoved his arm off, and yanked the door open. He stepped back, hands up like he was calming a scared animal. "I just need to show you something," he said. "I promise. It's not what you think." I didn't wait to hear the rest. I jumped into the driver's seat, slammed the door, and locked it. He stepped up to the window and started saying something else, but I couldn't hear it. I didn't try. I started the car and backed out without even checking behind me. In the rearview mirror, I saw him still standing there, staring at my car as I turned onto the main road and didn't stop driving until I saw the lights of the police station. The woman at the front desk could tell something was off. I didn't know how to explain it at first, but when I told her everything, his regular visits, the random items, how he knew where I parked and when I left, her expression changed. They filed it as a harassment report right away, A uniformed officer came in to talk with me in one of the side rooms. When I told him about the weird combinations of electronics, he started taking more notes. When I explained how he waited by my car and grabbed me, his tone shifted. They pulled footage from the mall cameras, and security confirmed everything I described. He really had stood there waiting, and I really had backed away from him fast before he followed me to the window. The weird part was they couldn't ID him. He never used a credit card. No loyalty card, no phone number, never even spoke long enough for the audio mics to catch a name. Just paid in cash and left. The detective said the purchases weren't random. Not really. He explained that people like him often shop for others, multiple people, sometimes ones they're watching. The kids' headphones, the chargers, the tablets. Maybe he wasn't buying for a family. Maybe he was buying for targets. They increased patrols around the mall, and especially around the rear parking lot. I was told to let them know if I saw him again. I didn't even wait. I transferred to the day shift the next morning. I never saw him again. The manager said he never came back. Not on a Thursday. Not on any day. The mall put in better lights near the far parking spots, and we all got a memo about calling security escorts if we ever felt unsafe. Nobody mentioned me by name, but everyone knew. I started parking closer, even if it meant circling the lot for 10 minutes. I stopped taking the same route home every night. I kept my phone charged, stayed alert, and paid attention in ways I never used to. I checked under my car once or twice. I didn't even know what I was checking for, but I did it anyway. Sometimes I still wonder who the electronics were really for. If it was just some scam, some weird resale thing, or if it was darker than that. If he had a basement somewhere, lined with different cords and screens for people he wanted to track. If I was supposed to be next. The worst part was how much he knew. He knew what time I worked, what time I left, where I parked. Things I never told anyone. Things he shouldn't have known. I try not to think about it, but I still check my mirrors more than I used to. When I walk to my car, I scan every row. When I see someone waiting near a vehicle, I keep my distance. And when something doesn't feel right, I leave. I don't wait for confirmation. I don't try to be polite. I don't give the benefit of the doubt. That night taught me something. Trust your instincts. Especially when something small starts to feel off. Because sometimes, the smallest wrong detail is all you get before something very bad happens. Last year, I was working night shifts at a warehouse just outside the city. The hours sucked, but the pay was steady, and the drive home was usually easy since I got off at 2:30 a.m. I took the bypass highway every night. It cut through a stretch of industrial and undeveloped land, so it was always dead quiet. Most nights I'd only see a couple long-haul trucks rumbling by, their red tail lights fading into the dark. That night felt the same as every other. Cold coffee in the cup holder. The same playlist looping through my car stereo, just trying to keep myself awake long enough to get home and crash. The highway was empty like usual, but as I came around the bend near the old Shell station, I saw orange cones and a blinking detour sign blocking the main lane. There were those little square lights flashing in a slow pattern, and a big orange arrow pointing traffic toward a side road. I tapped the brakes and slowed down. There weren't any vehicles in front of me, no cops, no workers standing by. Just the cones, the signs, and that arrow nudging me toward a side road I hadn't taken before. It wasn't marked with a detour sign, just a generic road that veered off through a darker part of the woods. No lights, no houses. I rolled to a stop and pulled over to the gravel shoulder, my tires crunching under the weight. Something about the whole thing felt off. I had checked the city's traffic page earlier in the night out of boredom. There hadn't been any scheduled maintenance on this stretch. No warnings. Nothing on the radio either. And yet here was this sudden detour with no explanation and not a soul in sight. I sat for a moment with the engine idling, staring at the cones. I looked in the rearview mirror. Still no cars behind me. I checked my phone for traffic alerts but had no signal. The air was quiet. Not just quiet, still. Like the world had stopped moving for a second. After a minute, I put the car in park, grabbed my jacket from the back seat, and stepped out to take a closer look. The cold hit me right away. I zipped up and walked slowly toward the barrier, my boots crunching over gravel and salt. The detour sign was propped up with sandbags. The cones were placed in a perfect line. Everything looked real, like a legit road closure. But the longer I looked, the more it didn't sit right. There were no tools, no reflective tape on the cones, no sound of machinery or backup beeps. Nothing but that arrow pointing into the dark. Just as I stepped closer to the center cone, someone appeared from the brush along the side of the highway. I froze for a second, heart ticking up. He was wearing a reflective road worker vest, but it was dirty, grimy at the seams and stained around the collar. His jeans were scuffed and he had thick work boots on. He looked like the kind of guy who'd been on shift for 12 hours straight, but something about him didn't fit. He didn't make eye contact. Just stepped out from the bushes like he didn't expect to be seen. His movements were jerky, like he wasn't sure whether to run or stand still. I asked, "Hey, what's going on? This road's supposed to be clear tonight, right?" He stopped a few feet away and muttered something I couldn't catch. I stepped a little closer, watching his hands. He didn't have gloves or a radio. He looked around nervously before speaking again. "Yeah, they're doing road work ahead. Bridge or some drain line thing. Can't drive through." "Where's your crew?" I asked, glancing behind him toward the empty highway. "They went down the way. Just fixing some stuff. Shouldn't be long." He wasn't making sense. He kept looking toward the trees behind him like he expected someone to pop out. His eyes never stayed on me for more than a second. Just fast glances and then back to the brush. His vest looked like the real thing, but his behavior didn't. Then he took a step toward me. Not fast, just one step closer, still mumbling. I instinctively stepped back. "You work for the city?" I asked. No answer. Just that same uneasy shifting from foot to foot. His boots scraped against the gravel like he couldn't keep still. Then he muttered something again. "Just stay on the side road, you'll be fine." Or something close to that. I started to say something back, but then I caught movement out of the corner of my eye. Behind him, in the trees, something flickered. A small beam of light, low to the ground, moving slowly between the branches. A flashlight. My eyes locked on it. It bobbed slightly, moving between trunks. Someone else was in the brush. Close, maybe 15 feet away, crouched low. I didn't say anything. Just turned and walked back toward my car, keeping my pace slow so it didn't look like I was running. The man didn't follow, but I heard the gravel crunch behind me. One step, then another. Not fast, just enough to know he wasn't staying put anymore. I got in my car and locked the doors before I even sat down fully. Flipped the gear to reverse. As I backed up, I saw the guy still standing by the cones watching me. He didn't yell, didn't wave. Just stood there, that same jittery stance, one foot pointed toward me, one angled toward the woods. Then the flashlight behind him flicked off. I didn't run, but I didn't walk slow either. My boots hit the gravel hard as I moved back toward my car, keeping my eyes on the man in the vest. The second I turned, I heard his pace pick up behind me. I didn't look back, just kept moving. Then I heard him shout something, short and loud, but I couldn't make out the words over the pounding in my chest. I reached the driver's side and went straight for the handle, flung the door open, and slid inside. Just as I grabbed for the door to close it, I caught movement from my left. Someone else stepping out of the trees, holding a flashlight low and walking fast toward me. His light swept across the front of my car, then hit my windshield, blinding me for a second. I slammed the door shut and locked it in one motion. Both men were walking faster now, coming in at angles from each side, like they were going to block me from pulling forward or reversing. I started the engine. The guy with the flashlight shouted something again, but I didn't wait to find out what it was. Instead of going through their fake detour, I twisted the wheel hard and made a sharp U-turn in the middle of the empty highway. My tires screeched on the cold asphalt. The cones blurred past my window as I accelerated the opposite direction, leaving both of them behind me in the rear view. Neither one chased. They just stood there, watching me go. I didn't stop driving until I was well off the bypass. Took the first exit I found, then cut through a few neighborhood streets I knew from memory. I kept checking the mirror. No headlights behind me. I didn't go home right away. Parked a few blocks away and waited for a while with the engine off. My hands were still shaking when I called the police. The dispatcher sounded calm but serious. When I described the roadblock and the two men, she didn't sound surprised. She told me they'd received a few similar reports recently. Fake closures, stolen cones and signs, always during the early morning hours on low-traffic routes. Nothing had been caught on camera. The detour setups always vanished before officers arrived, but this was the first time someone had seen people in vests. She said they'd send a patrol to check it out. I gave the exact location and stayed on the line for a few more minutes. When I finally hung up, I drove home slow, sticking to the main roads and well-lit streets. When I got inside, I locked everything, checked the windows, and sat on the couch for a long time before I even took off my shoes. The cops called me the next morning. They went to the spot I described but said there was nothing left. No cones, no signs, no people. But they had found something. Fresh tire marks on the shoulder. Boot prints in the soft dirt by the brush line. The cones and aero board had been city property, stolen from a real roadworks site a few towns over. Whoever set up the detour had known what they were doing. The officer said I probably avoided a robbery. The pattern matched a few other incidents in the county. Always late night. Always isolated sections of road. Always drivers traveling alone. That was it. They didn't have names. No arrests yet. They said if I saw anything like that again, I should never stop. Just call 911 right away and get to a safe place. The next evening, it was all over the local news. A series of highway robberies. Same method, same kind of setup. Fake construction. Road closed signs. Drivers boxed in and robbed at gunpoint. One driver was pistol whipped after refusing to hand over his keys. Police finally made arrests about a week later. Turned out someone who'd seen the detour that same night had circled back and taken down a plate number. Two men were caught at a motel off the interstate. One of them had a highway department vest in the back seat. The flashlight, too. Both were ex-convicts with a record of armed robbery. They'd been setting up these fake closures in different counties, using the stolen gear to look official. Their plan was simple. Trap drivers when they were alone, far from help, then hit them fast and disappear before cops got there. I sat on the edge of my bed that night and thought about how close I'd come. If I had parked a little farther from the car. If I'd listened to the guys mumbling. If I'd followed the detour just to see. I didn't sleep much. Now I never ignore that gut feeling. If a road looks wrong, I don't second guess it. I turn around. I report it. I still drive the same shift. Still take that bypass some nights. But I don't stop anymore. Not for cones. Not for signs. Not if there's no crew. Not if I'm alone. I don't care how real it looks. I'd rather be paranoid than dead. I worked security at a scrapyard in Detroit's industrial district from 4 p.m. to midnight. It wasn't the worst job I'd ever had. Most nights were boring, and the smell of oil and rust became normal after a while. My shift started just before sundown, so I had a solid couple hours of light before it got too dark. The owner was an old Polish guy named Gregor, who ran the place with his son, but they weren't around after 5. After that, it was just me, a battered little office with a portable heater, and the 2-acre yard filled with crushed cars, stripped appliances, rusted pipes, and piles of coiled wiring. Gregor had been pissed about someone stealing copper the previous few weeks, so he gave me an old ATV to patrol the perimeter every 30-40 minutes. Most nights, all I saw were raccoons, or maybe a homeless guy trying to sleep under some sheet metal. I'd usually just tell them to leave, and that was that. Nothing had ever felt dangerous, just grimy. That Tuesday, around 10 p.m., I was locking the main gate from the inside. It was chain link with a sliding bolt and a padlock that always stuck. I had just finished getting it shut when I noticed 4 guys standing across the street near the boarded-up car wash. There's no reason to be there. Nothing open. Nothing to do. But they were just there, talking in low voices, watching me. They weren't pretending not to look. One guy leaned against the side of the car wash like he belonged there, arms crossed, head tilted. Another paced slowly. The other 2 were talking, but their heads kept turning toward the yard. I didn't act like I noticed, but I saw all 4. Their clothes were dark, nothing flashy, and they kept their hands in their pockets. Something about it didn't sit right. I stood still a second longer, then walked back to the office like nothing was up. I did a full loop around the fence line just in case they were trying to use the distraction at the front. Nothing. Back inside the office, I texted Gregor to let him know what I saw. He didn't respond. He rarely did. At 11:05, I was halfway through my final round when I heard metallic banging from the far west corner of the yard, past the burned-out delivery van and the tire stacks. It was faint, but enough to catch over the engine noise of the ATV. I cut the throttle and coasted in silence for a bit. There it was again. Definitely the sound of something metal being moved. I turned the ATV around and headed straight for the noise. The headlights cut through the junk maze, bouncing off all the rusted edges. I came around the corner and saw them, 3 of the 4 men from earlier, standing next to an old refrigerator shell that someone had dumped last week. They had dragged out a shopping cart and were loading it with copper piping and old wire coils. There were already a couple coils stacked up next to it. One of them was reaching into the refrigerator carcass, pulling out more. Another was stuffing wires into a backpack. As soon as they saw me, 2 of them bolted. The third dropped the pipe he was holding and ran the opposite way toward the chain link fence. I swerved left, trying to follow the one with the backpack, but the ATV suddenly jerked and stuttered. It gave a few loud coughs and died under me. I sat there stunned, trying to restart it, but the key turned and did nothing. I jumped off and crouched down, thinking maybe something had overheated or got knocked loose. Then I saw it. The fuel line had been sliced. Clean. Deliberate. I ran my hand along the line. It wasn't worn or cracked. It had been cut. They'd planned this. They knew where the ATV would be parked and when. I turned around quickly, and that's when I saw the 4th man, the one who hadn't been loading copper. He was standing about 15 feet behind me, right where the path narrowed between 2 heaps of scrap. He wasn't chasing the others. He wasn't running. He was just standing there, not moving, blocking the only clear path back to the office. I was now stranded in the far corner with the 4th man still blocking the direct path to safety. I didn't say anything, didn't move, just held eye contact while slowly shifting my hand toward the radio clipped to my vest. He didn't budge. I pressed the call button and spoke low and steady. "Security dispatch. This is East Yard. Possible 211 in progress. 4 suspects on site. Requesting immediate response. Also contacting 911. He took a step forward, slow and deliberate. I backed up toward the nearest shipping container, keeping the flashlight in one hand and the radio in the other. I ducked behind the rusted blue doors and crouched low in the shadows. I could hear footsteps now, multiple sets, moving through the scrap rows. Then voices. "He saw your face." No, he didn't. Lights were in his eyes. Either way, he's seen too much. They were arguing, not whispering anymore, not panicking, just cold, controlled back and forth. One of them kicked something metal, sending a loud clang across the lot. "He's armed?" Didn't look like it. "We go now, or we deal with it." They were no longer just thieves. They were considering something else now. I stayed low, radio in one hand, ready to run if I heard them get closer. Then, distant but clear, the wail of sirens started to cut through the night air. It wasn't near yet, but it was closing fast. The voices got quieter. I heard one say, "Cops." Then running. Footsteps thudding on gravel, heavy breathing, metal clanging. I stayed hidden for another 2 minutes until flashing blue and red lights hit the far wall of the lot. By the time patrol cars pulled through the front gate with their floodlights sweeping the yard, all 4 men had vanished. Officers quickly fanned out across the scrapyard and the surrounding buildings. They found the shopping cart abandoned near the broken-down refrigerator, still full of stripped copper pipes and wire coils. There was also a canvas bag stashed under a car hood nearby. Inside were bolt cutters, gloves, a pry bar, and a small blowtorch. At the fence line on the west edge of the yard, they found a section of chain link neatly sliced and bent back just wide enough for a person to slip through. Not torn or rushed. This had been prepared. Officers followed tracks through the alley and around the corner to an old white van with tinted windows. It was parked 2 blocks away behind a liquor store. Inside, the seats were ripped out and replaced with plastic bins for hauling scrap. The plates were fake. So were the registration papers stuffed in the glove box. After checking with neighboring businesses and other scrapyards, the pattern started to take shape. This wasn't a one-time hit. These guys were part of an organized crew, probably out of town, targeting industrial salvage yards across Michigan. Always 4 men. Always a quick in and out. Each had a role: lookout, transport, extraction, and perimeter. I was lucky they hesitated. A week later, police picked up 3 of the suspects during a sting operation in Pontiac. One of them had a tattoo that matched the forearm ink I'd described on the guy carrying the backpack. Another had a warrant out for a previous BI&E charge downstate. They also recovered more tools and additional stolen scrap during the arrests. The 4th man, the one who had blocked my exit, who never spoke, never flinched, was never identified. Detectives believed he was the leader, the one who planned the hits and picked the targets. He'd likely worked a dozen jobs like this before. No fingerprints, no name, no past. Just gone. The bag of tools they left behind was eventually traced to a hardware store burglary in Flint 2 months prior. The police looped it into a wider investigation and tied it to a series of metal thefts that had cost small businesses tens of thousands of dollars. The copper in our yard alone would have been worth over $3 grand, maybe more depending on weight and condition. But that wasn't what stuck with me. What stuck was how close it came to being something else. They didn't just run. They considered the other option. I still work security. Still do night shifts sometimes. But I don't assume anymore. I don't take shortcuts. I don't try to play hero when it's just me against 4 strangers in the dark. Now I call for backup before confronting anyone, even if it's just a figure in the distance. I don't go into blind corners without a second voice on the radio. The line between theft and violence is thin. Thinner than I thought. And next time, I might not have the time to hear the sirens. During my sophomore year of college, I made extra money babysitting through a popular app. One weeknight, I got a last-minute request from the Miller family to watch their 8-year-old daughter Sophie while they attended a corporate event. The house was in a quiet Orlando suburb, and Sophie seemed friendly when she answered the door. She was wearing a bright pink t-shirt with unicorns on it and had 2 small braids that looked like someone had taken their time doing them. She immediately suggested we play board games in the living room, and I said sure. The house smelled like cinnamon and laundry detergent, clean and warm. Everything felt normal. I glanced at the family photo wall as we passed the hallway. Parents, daughter, even a golden retriever. We played a couple rounds of Sorry, and she kept laughing every time I landed on one of her pieces. I let her win without making it obvious. The place was tidy, but lived in, not staged like a model home. They had a chalkboard near the fridge with a note that read, "Dinner in fridge for Sophie, 7 p.m., and bedtime 9 p.m. I texted my roommate the address just in case, and settled in for what seemed like an easy evening job. Around 7, Sophie asked if she could watch a cartoon while I fixed her dinner. I said yes, and she turned on something on Disney+. I headed to the kitchen, opened the fridge, and found a small Tupperware container labeled Sophie's Dinner, mac and cheese plus veggies. I heated it up in the microwave, poured a juice box into a cup with a lid, and put both on a tray with a folded napkin. I tried to be neat so the parents would see I followed instructions. I was only gone about 10 minutes, but when I walked back into the living room, everything felt wrong. Sophie wasn't watching the TV anymore. She was sitting on the floor, knees pulled up to her chest, staring blankly ahead. Her body was rigid, hands clenched around her ankles. I stood there for a second, unsure if she was pretending or playing some new game. The cartoon was still on, but the sound was low, barely audible. "Sophie?" I asked. She didn't answer. I stepped closer and crouched next to her, holding out the tray. "Dinner's ready, sweetie." She didn't even look at it. Her eyes shifted slightly toward the staircase behind me, then back down to her lap. I turned and glanced at the staircase. Nothing. Just the dim upstairs hallway and a nightlight casting a soft blue glow on the wall. I faced her again. "Is something wrong?" She whispered. "No." It didn't match the look on her face. Her skin had gone pale. She looked like she hadn't blinked since I left the room. I set the tray down on the coffee table and tried again. "Did something happen while I was in the kitchen?" She shook her head once, still didn't move her body. I waited a few seconds, trying to think of what else to ask. "Are you feeling sick?" "No," she said again. Flat. Emotionless. Her tone was totally different from how she'd been earlier. I asked if she wanted to move to the table to eat, and she didn't respond. Just that same weird stare, and her head turned slightly again, toward the staircase. This time slower, then back to the floor. I stood up and walked to the base of the stairs, peered up, and called out, "Hello?" Half joking, half serious. I felt like a fool immediately. Of course no one was up there. Still, I waited for a beat just in case. Nothing. I turned and looked back at Sophie. She hadn't moved. Not even an inch. I walked over and muted the TV. "Sophie, you were really happy just a minute ago. Can you please tell me what happened?" Her lips moved, but there was no sound. I leaned closer. "What?" she whispered again. I caught it this time. Can we go outside? That was the first full sentence she'd said since I got back from the kitchen. I was too confused to answer right away. Why? I asked. She just repeated it. Can we go outside now? I checked the time. It wasn't even dark yet, but the sun had dipped low. Still, something in the way she asked unsettled me. Not playful or curious, more like scared. I looked back at the staircase. Still empty. I don't think we should leave the house, I said. Your mom and dad didn't mention anything like that. She pulled her knees in tighter. Please. Her voice cracked on that word. It sounded different than before. Like she was on the edge of crying but trying to hide it. I sat on the arm of the couch, unsure what to do. She wasn't hurt. Nothing was broken. The doors were locked. Everything looked the same as before I'd gone into the kitchen. But Sophie wasn't the same. I picked up her juice and held it out again. You can have this right here, okay? We don't have to go anywhere. She didn't touch it. Her eyes were locked on the staircase again, and her mouth was slightly open now, like she was holding her breath. I heard a faint creak from upstairs. My neck stiffened. I tried to tell myself it was just the house settling, or maybe the dog if they had one. I hadn't seen it yet, but there was a food bowl by the back door. You guys have a dog, right? She gave a tiny shake of her head, still watching the stairs. What's upstairs? I asked, but my voice came out low. She didn't answer. I stood and walked quietly toward the staircase, pausing at the bottom step. The creak hadn't repeated. Everything was silent again except the hum of the fridge and the muted cartoon menu screen still flickering. I turned and looked back. Sophie was now standing. She hadn't made a sound, just rose up and stood with her arms stiff at her sides, still facing the staircase. Her juice was untouched. The dinner tray sat where I left it. Nothing else moved. I tried to get Sophie to talk about what was bothering her, but she wouldn't say much. She just stayed close to me, barely letting go of my sleeve as I moved around the living room. I brought the dinner tray over to the table and tried to encourage her to eat, but she only picked at the pasta with her fork. Her eyes kept darting toward the hallway, then toward the front windows, then back again. She barely looked at the food. I asked her again if she felt sick, or if she had a nightmare, but she just shook her head. Then I asked if she wanted me to call her mom, and she immediately said no. Not loud, not panicked, just firm. When I pressed a little more, she finally said in a whisper, "Can I stay down here tonight?" "It's almost bedtime," I told her. "Don't you usually sleep upstairs?" She didn't answer. At around 9:15, I told her we could watch one more short cartoon, then she needed to get to bed. She nodded but didn't really react. I let her sit next to me on the couch, and I noticed she kept twisting her fingers in her lap. When the show ended, she made no move to get up. I stood and held out my hand, and she reluctantly took it. Her grip tightened as we approached the stairs. We went up slowly. She kept close to the wall, almost as if she didn't want to be in the open. I didn't say anything about it. Her bedroom was at the end of the hallway, past a guest room and a small office. When we reached her door, she paused. I opened it for her and switched on the light. It was a normal kid's room. Stuffed animals on the bed, posters on the wall, a bookshelf crammed with paperbacks. Everything neat and clean. But Sophie stopped in the doorway like she didn't want to go in. She looked up at me. "You'll stay right outside?" "I'll be downstairs," I said. "But I'll leave the door open, okay? Just don't shut it." "I won't." She climbed into bed and lay on her side, watching the door. I pulled the covers up around her and reached for the nightlight by the dresser. She grabbed my wrist. "Don't leave." I sat back down on the edge of the bed and looked at her. "Sophie, what's scaring you?" She stared at the closet. "I just don't want to be alone." I stayed for another minute, brushing her hair back and saying I'd be just downstairs if she needed anything. Eventually, she let go of my wrist. I turned the nightlight on, left the door cracked open, and walked quietly down the stairs. I was barely 10 minutes into scrolling through my phone on the couch when I heard something upstairs. It was faint, like movement. I paused and listened. At first, nothing. Then again, something like a shuffle, soft but heavy. Not just a creaky floorboard or the wind outside. I stood up, trying not to make a sound. My shoes were still by the door, so I stepped quietly to the stairs in my socks. I didn't want to call out and scare her if it was just Sophie getting out of bed, but the sound wasn't light enough to be her. I climbed the stairs slowly, stopping at the top to listen again. Silence. Her bedroom door was still ajar, the same as I left it. The light inside glowed faintly. I walked toward it and peeked in. Sophie was lying flat on her back, eyes wide open, frozen. Not asleep, not blinking, just staring up at the ceiling, totally rigid. I whispered her name, and she didn't react. Then I noticed the closet door. It was cracked open maybe 2 inches. I hadn't opened it. I hadn't even gone near it when I put her to bed. I stepped farther into the room and stopped. I didn't want to alarm Sophie, but something in my body felt locked up. Then I heard it. Breathing. Very quiet. Very shallow. Coming from the closet. Not hers. Not mine. I turned and looked straight at her. She was staring at me now, eyes darting between me and the closet. I didn't say anything. I just moved toward her, scooped her up in both arms, and backed out of the room. As soon as we were in the hallway, I walked fast. Sophie clung to my neck, shaking. Down the stairs, through the kitchen, straight to the back door. I flipped the lock and stepped outside, closing it gently behind us. My phone was in my jacket on the chair near the door, but I didn't risk going back for it. I kept Sophie against me as I jogged to my car parked along the curb. I put her in the back seat and got in, locked all the doors. That's when I called 911. I told them I was a babysitter, that I was supposed to be alone in the house with the child, that someone else was inside. I gave the address and kept my eyes on the house. The operator told me to stay on the line. 2 minutes later, I saw headlights, then the flashing reds and blues. A patrol car pulled up and 2 officers jumped out, weapons drawn. I unlocked the door and stepped out. I pointed toward the back door and said nothing else. One officer waved me toward the cruiser. The other approached the house with his gun up. We sat in the police car while they went inside. Sophie leaned against me, not saying anything. 10 minutes passed. Then another officer appeared and asked if I had the parents' contact info. I gave them the numbers listed on the app profile. A second patrol car pulled up, followed by an ambulance, though no one had been hurt. It took about 30 more minutes before they came back with him. He was in handcuffs, wearing dark clothes and a filthy gray hoodie. Pale, thin, barely older than me. Could have passed for someone just out of high school, but I learned later he was 25. He kept his head down as they walked him to the cruiser. One of the officers told me he'd been living in the crawl space beneath the house. Said he broke in through an unlocked basement window a few nights earlier, and had been hiding ever since. He'd apparently picked that house because he'd seen the parents leave every night that week at the same time, same outfits. He knew the routine. Sophie must have seen him come out of the closet when I was in the kitchen. That's when everything changed. The officers said he had no weapon on him, but they found a knife under a pile of towels in the basement and another one under a mattress in the guest room. They thought he was planning to wait until everyone was asleep. Sophie's parents arrived while he was still in the back of the squad car. Her mom ran straight to the cruiser I was in and pulled her daughter into a hug. The officers had already cleared the house. The crawl space was searched, basement window boarded, every door double locked. The family offered me money. I said no. They hugged me and thanked me for calling the police and not waiting. It was only a few hours, but it felt like I'd been in that house for days. I still remember Sophie's face when I came into that room. I still hear the quiet breathing that didn't belong to her. I think about what would have happened if I'd ignored it, if I'd brushed it off as nothing and waited another half hour. I'll never assume a kid is just being weird again. When I was 24, I lived alone in a suburb just outside Denver. It wasn't the safest area in the state, but I liked it well enough. Rent was decent, I had a short drive to work, and there was a Target 2 minutes from my apartment where I did most of my shopping. It was quiet, familiar, and usually full of other people minding their own business. That Tuesday evening around 6 p.m., I was there picking up a few things before heading home. Protein powder, frozen meals, the usual stuff. I remember I had just turned down the sports nutrition aisle when a man came up next to me. He looked older, maybe 40, balding, no cart, no basket, just walking directly toward me. Right away, he asked if I worked at the university nearby. I shook my head and said no and kept walking, but he stepped closer. Something about how he moved made my skin crawl. He was tall, maybe 6 feet, standing a bit too close for a stranger, and there was no reason for him to be in that aisle if he wasn't shopping for something. I'd noticed him earlier near the pharmacy section, lingering, glancing in my direction, but didn't think much of it until now. He smiled as I tried to sidestep past him. "Are you sure? You really look like someone I saw on campus," he said. "I don't work there," I repeated, and turned my back to him, pretending to check labels on the shelf. I figured if I ignored him, he'd move on. But he didn't. I could feel him shift position behind me, like he was angling to keep me cornered in the narrow aisle. "You from around here?" he asked. I didn't respond this time. I just walked toward the end of the aisle, trying to put distance between us. I could feel my hands tense. Something was off. This wasn't small talk. He wasn't just being friendly. I reached the main aisle and turned left toward the checkout lanes. I could see them ahead, maybe 30 feet away. I kept a steady pace, didn't run. I didn't want to draw attention or make him escalate, but I could hear footsteps behind me, and then his voice again, closer than I expected. "You've got a great look," he said. "You single? Can I get your number?" I didn't stop walking. "No," I said, without looking back. "I'm just asking," he said, a little sharper now. "You don't have to be rude." I didn't answer. I reached the front of the store and slipped into the shortest checkout line, hoping he'd take the hint and disappear. I glanced around casually, pretending to check out the impulse buys while keeping him in my peripheral vision. He hadn't left. He was hanging back a few aisles behind me, walking slowly, pretending to look at stuff near the seasonal section. But he wasn't picking anything up. His eyes were on me. The woman in front of me finished paying. I dumped my items on the belt quickly and waited, trying to act normal. I told myself I was overreacting, that maybe he was just awkward, but my stomach was tight. I'd seen him earlier, loitering, not shopping, and now he had followed me from the back of the store to the front. I paid with my card, didn't take the receipt, and grabbed my bag with both hands. As I walked toward the exit, I looked back one more time. He was still there, standing half behind a cardboard display near the end of an aisle, watching me. I pushed through the automatic doors. The parking lot felt darker than usual. The lights were on, but the shadows stretched longer than I remembered. I scanned the lot for my car as I walked fast, keys already out. I didn't see him behind me, but I didn't feel safe. Outside, I spotted him right away. He was standing next to a red pickup truck, leaning against the passenger side, phone to his ear, but his eyes locked on me. It wasn't casual. He didn't glance away when I looked over. He didn't flinch or pretend to be busy. He just stared. My legs kept moving, but I felt unsteady. My car was 3 rows over, near the far end of the lot. I tried to keep my pace normal as I walked across the asphalt, keys tight in my hand. I didn't look back again, but I could feel his eyes burning into me. When I reached my car, my hands were shaking too much to get the key in on the first try. I dropped them, picked them up, and finally unlocked the door. I climbed in, slammed it shut, and immediately locked all the doors. The engine took a second to turn over, but when it did, I threw the gear into reverse. My eyes flicked to the windshield. He was off the phone now. The way he stepped out from his truck, the way his feet hit the pavement. He wasn't wandering or stretching his legs. He was walking toward me, directly, like he already knew which car I was in. I didn't wait. I backed out fast, nearly bumping the cart return behind me, then turned the wheel sharp and drove toward the lot's exit without stopping. At the stop sign just outside the parking lot, I checked my mirror again. The man had stopped where I'd been parked. He had something in his hands, a small notepad and a pen. He looked down, then up again, then back down. Writing. It took me a second to register what he was doing. He was writing down my license plate. My chest felt tight, like it was cinched in with a strap. I turned the corner, then another, then again. I didn't drive home right away. I took a winding path through the neighborhood behind the strip mall, watching every turn, every intersection. I didn't see him following. No red truck, no headlights tailing me. Still, I didn't go straight home. I drove around for almost 15 minutes, cutting through residential streets I didn't even recognize. When I finally pulled into my apartment complex, I didn't go to my usual parking spot. I picked one on the other side of the building, 2 rows from my front door. I sat in the car with the engine off and watched the street. 10 minutes went by. Then 5 more. Nobody showed up. I went inside and locked the door behind me, checked it twice, closed every curtain, even the little one in the kitchen. I didn't sleep well that night. Every sound in the hallway made me sit up and listen. I kept picturing him writing on that pad. What was he planning to do with my plate number? How long had he been watching me? The next morning, I knocked on my neighbor's door. Mrs. Patterson was in her 70s, lived alone, but she was sharp and didn't miss much. I told her what happened, step by step. She didn't even let me finish before saying, "You need to report that. Today." She offered to go with me if I didn't want to go alone. I thanked her and drove to the police station on my own. I filed a report. The officer behind the desk asked for a description: age, height, vehicle, what he said. When I mentioned the license plate part, the officer just nodded and said, "We'll keep it on file." He told me unless the guy actually tried something, followed me, threatened me, touched me, there wasn't much they could do. "But trust your gut," he said. "If something feels wrong, it usually is." I changed my routine completely after that. New routes to work, different grocery store, different parking spot every day. I started looking over my shoulder when I walked to my car. I never used the Target again. For the next week, nothing happened. No red truck, no weird notes, no men hanging around the complex. Still, I kept waiting. Every time I heard a car pull into the lot late at night, I checked the blinds. Every morning before I left for work, I looked under my car. I stopped wearing both earbuds while walking. I got used to holding my keys like a weapon in my hand. Eventually, the days got easier. I went a whole week without thinking about him. Then 2. But I never forgot that feeling. The way he looked at me like I was already his problem to solve. Like he'd decided something before I even spoke. It's been over 2 years now. I've moved to a different apartment in a different neighborhood. I feel safer here. But sometimes, in stores, when a stranger comes up and asks where something is, or says I look familiar, I feel that grip in my chest again. I remember the way he stepped between me and the aisle, the way he smiled like it wasn't weird, the way he followed without shame. I used to think I was being dramatic. Now, I don't care if it looks paranoid. If it feels wrong, I leave. I don't wait for it to escalate. I don't give people the benefit of the doubt anymore. Last summer, I was cycling through rural Vermont, taking my usual Saturday route through the hills outside town. I always liked that loop. Started from the edge of the neighborhood, passed through a couple residential streets, then straight into a network of quiet country roads, lined with old barns and long stretches of pasture. It was my favorite way to clear my head before the work week. Hardly any cars ever came through that area, especially once I was a few miles in. Just me, the road, and the occasional cow behind a wire fence. Around noon, I was maybe 10 miles out, somewhere near an old red grain silo I usually used as a halfway marker. That's when a beat-up pickup truck came up behind me. It slowed down and rolled up beside me on the road. The guy driving leaned across the cab and asked if I knew someone named Michael Rogers. I looked over and gave him a quick glance. Mid-30s, I'd guess. Thin, pale. His eyes were kind of sunken, like he hadn't slept right. And he had one of those crude tattoos on his neck. Looked like something you'd get done in jail with a pen and a needle. The ink was faded, maybe an old spiderweb or lettering. I couldn't quite tell. I told him no. I didn't know anyone by that name. He nodded, smiled like it was just a casual question, and said, "All right, thanks anyway." Then he drove off, the truck coughing up a puff of black exhaust as it pulled away. I didn't think much of it. People in the country ask directions or names like that sometimes. Maybe he was looking for someone he used to know. Maybe a wrong address. Who knows? I wiped some sweat off my forehead, shifted gears, and kept riding. The road dipped a bit after the silo, and then curved eastward, weaving between fields and patches of woods. It was a hot day, but the breeze up there always helped. About 15 minutes later, I was maybe 4 or 5 miles from where I'd last seen that guy. I'd taken at least 3 different turns since then. Left at a fork by the creek, right at an old mail truck sitting in the weeds, then another left past a blue farmhouse with a swing hanging off a tree. I was heading downhill when I saw the same pickup truck again. It was parked on the side of the road just past a bend. The guy was standing outside the cab this time, leaning against the door. When I got closer, he flagged me down with one hand. "Hey," he said. "Sorry to bug you again. Do you happen to know a guy named Michael Rogers? I think he lives around here somewhere." Same words, same tone, like we'd never spoken. I slowed down and squinted at him. "You asked me that back on Birch Hill Road," I said. He paused. "Did I?" Then he smiled. "Huh. Must be mixing people up. My bad." I didn't answer that. Just nodded and pedaled forward, a little faster now. He didn't follow me this time, just stood there watching as I rode off. I went maybe another half mile before I looked back. The truck hadn't moved. But that's when it started to really bother me, because the turns I'd taken weren't obvious. They weren't the kind of turns someone could just guess if they were randomly looking for someone. No GPS, no signposts. Just local knowledge and landmarks you wouldn't even notice unless you'd ridden the loop a dozen times like I had. There was no straight way to cut from Birch Hill to the spot where he'd parked again. No shortcut that made sense. Either he was circling ahead of me on purpose, or he was trailing me. But if he was following me, he would have had to speed through a network of tight bends and farm access roads, just to end up there at the right time. That's when I started paying attention to every car I saw. I don't usually do that on these rides. I go out here because it's quiet, because I don't have to think about stuff like traffic or people. But after that second encounter, I checked my mirror every 2 minutes, glanced over my shoulder at every driveway I passed. I kept expecting to see the truck again. But for the next few miles, the road stayed empty. A few tractors off in the fields, one mail van parked near a fence, no sign of the pickup. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I didn't hear anything behind me, but I knew enough to start keeping track of what was around me. That's the thing about those roads. You think they're wide open, but they're full of blind spots. Cornfields on both sides, narrow tree lines, long driveways you don't notice unless you're looking straight down them. I didn't see the truck again for a while, but that didn't help, because now I was wondering if he'd turned off somewhere to wait. When the pickup appeared a third time on yet another back road, it was like everything shifted. He was already there when I rounded a bend, parked at an angle across the gravel like he'd been waiting for me. No wave this time, no casual tone. He just stared through the windshield until I was nearly beside him. Then he leaned out the window again. "Hey, you sure you don't know Michael Rogers?" His voice was flatter now. No curiosity, no friendliness. Just that same dead stare and the exact same question, as if he hadn't asked me twice already. As if he didn't remember our earlier conversations, or worse, was pretending he didn't. I slowed down, but didn't stop completely this time. Just enough to avoid swerving into the ditch, then kept pedaling. "Told you already," I said. "I don't know him." He didn't respond, just kept his eyes locked on me, face completely expressionless. It was the kind of look you don't forget, the kind that makes your skin feel too small for your body. I pushed harder on the pedals and didn't look back. Not for a long while. The road ahead was a mess of unmarked intersections and farm lanes. I knew the area well enough to keep moving, but I'd lost the relaxed rhythm I started with that morning. Every time a car appeared in the distance, I braced for it to be the same truck again. But nothing passed me for miles. Just wind, fence posts, and that gnawing silence that fills your head when something's not right. When it happened the fourth time, I was heading east on a narrow gravel stretch that cut through a field of sunflowers. The road forked ahead, splitting into 2 dirt tracks between tree lines. I was already tired, but something told me to speed up anyway. That instinct again, crawling up my spine. Then I heard it. The growl of the truck engine behind me. It wasn't creeping anymore. It was accelerating. Tires crunching gravel, the engine rising as he closed the gap. I didn't even glance back this time. I shot down the left path, tires slipping on the dust, stones pinging off my rims as I sprinted. He couldn't follow. The dirt trail was too narrow for a truck and bordered by ditches too deep to cross. I could hear the pickup pulling up short on the main road, then doors slamming, then shouting, "Where is Michael Rogers?" His voice echoed across the fields, full of something twisted now. Not anger. Something colder. Like he wasn't asking anymore. Like he was searching for a reason. I didn't stop. I couldn't. That narrow trail ran between 2 fields and curved toward a tree line, then opened near a small creek and a bridge I remembered from last year. I passed over the planks and turned again, following a thin gravel stretch uphill until I saw the edge of town. The village was barely more than 5 buildings. A general store, a post office, a small church, and 2 homes with peeling shutters. But it had people. I coasted into the lot out front of the store and leaned my bike against the wall. My hands shook. I could barely get the water bottle out of the holder. The man inside the store was talking to someone at the counter when he saw me. "You all right?" I nodded, then shook my head. "Some guy's been following me. Old green pickup. Asked about someone named Michael Rogers. Over and over." The man frowned. "You say green truck?" I nodded again. "Don't know the name, but I've seen that truck lately. Parked down by the grain lot a few times this week. Didn't think much of it." I stayed there for maybe half an hour. Enough time for my heart to slow down and my legs to stop trembling. I didn't see the truck again. I asked the store owner if there was another way back toward town, and he pointed me toward a paved route used by supply trucks. Longer, but safer. That evening, back at home, I couldn't get the guy's face out of my head. The way he repeated that name like it meant something more. Like the question wasn't a question anymore, but a message. I sat at my desk and typed in the name, Michael Rogers, Vermont, and hit search. One of the first results was a local newspaper article from 3 years ago. The headline, "Michael Rogers sentenced for bar assault. Local man faces." 3 years after violent incident at Braddock's Tavern. I clicked it open. The mugshot made my stomach drop. Same face, same sunken eyes, same neck tattoo, only in clearer detail now. His name was Michael Rogers, the man who'd followed me all afternoon. The article explained he'd put a man in the hospital with a tire iron during a fight. He was convicted of assault with a deadly weapon, served 3 years, and had just been released from prison last month. I sat there reading it twice, then again. He wasn't looking for someone named Michael Rogers. He was checking if anyone recognized him. If his name meant anything to the people around here. Maybe he wanted to know who remembered, who might talk, who might still be angry. Maybe worse, who might have testified. That question wasn't about finding someone. It was bait. The next weekend I changed my route completely. No more rural loops, no more empty gravel roads. I stuck to the shoulder lanes of state routes with traffic. Noisy, crowded, safe. Cars all around. Witnesses. I still cycle, but I don't take those quiet roads anymore. There's nothing wrong with open space until someone else sees it as an opportunity. Out there, you're alone. And some people like Rogers, count on that. Now I trust my gut. Every time. Because it wasn't paranoia that saved me that day. It was instinct. And sometimes, that's the only thing standing between you and something worse. Two years ago, I was working as a detective in suburban Denver investigating a string of break-ins that had the neighborhood on edge. The pattern was clear. Always the back doors, always at night, always high-end electronics, nothing else touched. No jewelry, no cash, not even wallets or purses. Just game consoles, sound systems, and laptops. It had the feeling of something organized, not just a one-off desperate junkie job. One of the victims mentioned something that stuck with me. She said there was a car, same one, same spot, parked across from her house multiple evenings before the break-in. She said it was a woman behind the wheel, sitting alone, just watching. Never got out. Never moved. After the 3rd time, she took a picture. Grainy, but enough to make out the make and model. Dark sedan, older Honda or Nissan. I brought it to my partner, Dave Miller. We'd been partners for 5 years. We didn't always agree on methods, but we trusted each other. I showed him the photo, and he agreed we should look into it. We ran the plate, but the numbers were unclear, and the hit came back as inconclusive. Still, it was something. We decided to set up a stakeout in the neighborhood where the latest string of burglaries had occurred. Maple Street. Quiet, mid-range houses, mostly young families and retired couples. We set up in an unmarked car with tinted windows near the intersection of Maple and 37th. Dave brought sandwiches and a thermos of black coffee. It was already getting dark when we parked, just before 8:30 p.m. Hours went by, nothing. We took turns dozing off, one of us always watching. The night air was still, the kind that made every crunch of gravel or creak of a fence sound louder than it should be. Around 1:10 a.m., a dark sedan turned onto Maple, headlights off. It moved slow, like barely rolling. Dave nudged me and pointed. Same kind of car, same look as the photo. It was her. She was alone, just like the victim said. Pale face, hair pulled back, eyes focused straight ahead, scanning houses one by one. She didn't look rushed, didn't even seem like she was trying to be sneaky. Just moved deliberately down the block, windows up, lights off. She passed 3 houses and then circled the block. Came back around 2 minutes later and pulled over, facing the opposite direction. We stayed back, watching. No movement. She didn't get out. Just sat there. 10 minutes passed. Then 15. She finally pulled out slowly, turned onto 36th, and we tailed her from a distance, keeping our headlights off. She drove like someone who didn't want to get noticed. No sudden turns, never ran a stop sign, and stayed at or below the speed limit the entire time. She drove out of the residential area and onto a more rural stretch of road that led toward the outskirts of town. Trailer parks, small farms, construction sites, and lots of overgrown lots. The kind of places you forget are still technically part of the city. She pulled into a trailer park, old, half-abandoned, only a few units with lights on. She drove all the way to the end and parked in front of a trailer that looked almost swallowed by weeds and debris. No fence, no neighbors. One busted porch light, flickering. The kind of place no one pays attention to. We parked down the road and called it in. I ran the plate again, this time in real time. It came back stolen, taken off a car reported missing 2 weeks ago from another suburb. That set off a different alarm in my head. This wasn't just someone casing houses. This was someone who didn't want to be found. While we were deciding whether to wait or approach, we started hearing voices. At first, I thought it was just someone arguing inside the trailer. Then I noticed the tone. Fast. Aggressive. Not shouting, but sharp enough that it wasn't casual. We both stepped out of the car, staying low, and moved toward the trailer. It was quiet around us. No dogs barking. No lights from nearby trailers. No sound of traffic. The trailer had one side window, the blind pulled down crooked. We approached from the rear, behind an overgrown fence half fallen over. I crouched by the back door listening. The voices were louder now. A man, a woman, then a bang, then a muffled yelp. Dave looked at me. No words. We both pulled our sidearms. The rear door was flimsy. No deadbolt. Just a screen door and a warped wooden frame. We didn't knock. As soon as we opened it, we heard a crash from inside. Something heavy hit the floor. Then silence. We moved in fast. The trailer was dim, light only from a cheap lamp in the living room. The furniture was sparse. Folding chairs, a broken couch, a card table covered in wires and tools. At the far end of the room, a narrow hallway led to 2 doors. One was wide open, the other cracked. We cleared the open room first. Empty, mattress on the floor, nothing else. Then the second door. Dave pushed it open fast, sweeping left. I stepped in after, right. The woman from the car was there. She was sitting on the floor, hands tied behind her back, duct tape across her mouth, blood on her forehead. Next to her was a small boy, maybe 8, also tied, gagged, trembling. His eyes shot wide when he saw us. Dave rushed to cut the tape. I scanned the room. No one else. But then I noticed the back window. Open. The screen popped out, the curtain flapping. I ran out the back door, cutting left around the trailer. Nothing. Then I heard it. Running footsteps behind the units. Gravel crunching, fast. I followed, sprinting, gun drawn. Dave suggested we split up to get a better view of the situation before calling for backup. He would circle around to the back while I watched the front entrance. We agreed to meet back at our car in 15 minutes to compare notes. I crouched behind a rusted pickup truck and kept eyes on the trailer through binoculars. The shouting inside continued, and I caught glimpses of shadows crossing back and forth past the window blinds. Fast, chaotic movements like someone pacing or dragging something. The woman's car sat crooked in the dirt lot, one tire slightly deflated. About 10 minutes passed. The voices inside got quieter, but didn't stop. Then silence. Total stillness, like whoever had been yelling suddenly realized something was wrong. I glanced at my watch. 17 minutes. No sign of Dave. I waited another minute, then tried his radio. "Dave, you copy?" Nothing but static. I adjusted the frequency, checked the antenna, tried again. Still nothing. I stood up, took one last glance at the trailer, and moved quickly back toward our unmarked car, expecting to find him already there, or maybe crouched nearby in a better position. But the car was empty. Driver door closed, keys gone. The thermos of coffee we'd brought was tipped over on the floorboard. I called his phone. It rang once, then cut to voicemail. I turned and jogged back toward the trailer, staying low. That's when I noticed disturbed brush behind the property, like someone had moved through in a hurry. I followed the path about 20 feet and spotted something dark under the branches of a low bush. It was Dave's phone. Next to it, his radio. But no Dave. I scanned the tree line and called out softly. Nothing. Then I looked back toward the trailer. The voices were gone. It was dead quiet again. I moved in slow from the rear, where Dave was supposed to be. The back door of the trailer was wide open. Not just ajar, wide open like someone had run out fast or left in a panic. I stepped up onto the soft, rotting wood of the back steps and peered inside. Chemical stench hit me first. Sharp. Acidic. The living room was a mess. Trash bags full of used gloves and empty Sudafed boxes, stained mixing bowls, blackened glassware. Definitely a meth lab. Not a clean one either. The card table we saw earlier was now mostly cleared off, except for a roll of duct tape, a knife, and zip ties. I moved through the rest of the trailer fast. No one inside. But there were more signs of recent activity. A pile of clothes near the door, cigarette butts on the floor, one fresh print in a puddle of spilled water. I went back out and circled around the trailer. In the dirt, under the moonlight, I could make out fresh tire tracks. At least 3 sets, heading out in a hurry. They'd gone down the gravel path that looped around the park and led to the main road. There wasn't much to follow. No plates, no faces, just the smell of chemicals and burned plastic lingering in the air. I got on the radio and called for backup. They arrived 20 minutes later. 2 cruisers, then the local sheriff's truck, then a van with the mobile lab team. By then, everything worth finding was already gone. No one at the neighboring trailers had seen or heard anything useful. The ones who were still there either kept their doors shut or claimed not to know who lived at the unit. No one admitted to knowing the woman. The kid, the one we found tied up, had been taken in by social services. He barely spoke and didn't seem to know anything, just scared out of his mind. The evidence team worked the trailer overnight. They found traces of at least 4 different people's DNA. None matched anyone in local databases. I stayed through most of it, filing the report, going over timelines, trying to piece together what exactly we'd walked into. By sunrise, we had one confirmed identity: the woman from the car. She had a record, nothing serious. Trespassing, possession, one misdemeanor for shoplifting. But she dropped off the radar 2 years ago. No job, no bank account, no social, just vanished. Until now. Over the next few days, it became clear the burglaries weren't just about electronics. They were funding something bigger. Tools, precursors, untraceable ingredients bought through darknet markets. We'd thought it was a string of robberies. It was actually the tail end of a supply chain, and we just caught the middle of it. We launched a multi-agency investigation. DEA got involved. They tracked financials, online purchases, phone records. Nothing led us directly to Dave. The lab team found 2 different blood types in the trailer. One was from the woman. The other was unidentified. They couldn't confirm if it was his. I searched every inch of that trailer park, the woods behind it, and the drainage ditch that ran past the lot. We brought in dogs, thermal drones. Nothing. 3 weeks passed. No trace of him. No ransom. No body. No noise. Then, 6 months later, I got a call from a detective in Tulsa. They picked up the woman during a traffic stop. She gave a fake name, tried to run, but they caught her. When they processed her, she matched the prints we submitted to the DEA database. They brought me in for questioning. I sat across from her, asked straight out where my partner was. She blinked like she didn't understand the question. "I don't know who you're talking about." I showed her his photo. She shrugged. "I've never seen him before." She stuck to the story. Lawyered up after 10 minutes. Wouldn't speak again. They held her on state charges, drug trafficking, obstruction, fleeing police. But she never faced anything federal. The DEA couldn't tie her directly to the lab. She claimed she was just a courier. Didn't know the men who ran the operation. Said she was paid in cash and meth. The kid, she said, wasn't hers. The lab results said otherwise. She got 5 years on a plea deal. She'll be out in 3. I transferred out of Denver 6 weeks after that interview. I didn't want to drive those streets anymore. Didn't want to look at the trailer park. Didn't want to sit at the desk across from Dave's with his mug still sitting there. They never found him. Sometimes I wonder if he's out there somewhere. Alive. Being held. Or maybe buried in some unmarked stretch of woods behind that trailer. Or maybe he never left that night at all. The case was closed, but nothing felt finished. Sometimes, the real danger in this job isn't the bullets or the chase. It's the quiet moments after. The way the world just keeps moving forward, pretending like someone never existed. And you're the only one who remembers every single second. Last spring when I was 20, I went to a music festival in downtown Portland with my roommates. It was one of those 3-day events spread across a dozen venues. Most of the big acts were packed into the same block near Pioneer Courthouse Square, so the crowd in that area was non-stop from about 2 p.m. until well after midnight. We got there around 5 in the evening on Saturday, just in time to catch one of our favorite indie bands. It was loud, packed, and chaotic, but still fun. The weather was perfect, cool but dry, and everyone seemed to be in a good mood. I stuck with my roommates for a few hours, hopping between the main stage and a couple of smaller ones on side streets. By around 11 p.m., I'd hit a wall. I hadn't eaten much, my feet were killing me, and I had a headache starting to build from the noise. My friends were still hyped up and wanted to stick around for the after party, which was happening in a warehouse club on the east side. I didn't want to ruin the night for them, so I told them I'd head home. My apartment was about an hour's walk away, close to the University District. Normally I would have taken the bus, but the last one had already stopped running, and I didn't have money for a rideshare or taxi. I was saving every extra dollar for books and groceries, and figured the walk would do me good. I texted my roommates to let them know I was heading out, then started walking west toward the bridge. The streets downtown were still lit up and busy with other people leaving the festival, so I didn't feel weird or unsafe at all. It wasn't my first time walking home late. Portland's not a huge city, and even though there were always some sketchy parts, I'd never had a real problem. I stayed on main streets for the first 20 minutes, cutting across a few well-lit blocks and following a familiar route. There were a lot of people around at first, mostly other festival goers, groups laughing and talking loudly, couples holding hands, a few street vendors still trying to sell hot dogs. About 30 minutes into my walk, the crowd had thinned out. I passed a few late-night food carts and a closed-up record shop, but otherwise, it was quiet. I was just zoning out and moving forward, not thinking too much about anything, when I noticed a silver sedan drive slowly past me from behind. I didn't think anything of it at first, just figured they were looking for parking or trying to pick someone up. But then, 2 blocks later, I saw the same car again. It turned at the intersection ahead of me, passed me going the opposite direction, then disappeared around the corner. I hesitated, looked back over my shoulder, and kept walking. About 5 minutes later, it showed up again. This time it passed slowly on the opposite side of the street, then turned again, looping around. I kept my head down and picked up my pace. I told myself it was probably just a coincidence. Still, I turned into a side street to get off the main drag. It was a quieter residential neighborhood with small houses, some porch lights on, and tall hedges lining the sidewalks. I'd taken this shortcut before. It saved time and always felt safe. That's when I noticed someone standing near a parked car ahead of me. He was leaning against it, half in the shadows. As I got closer, he stepped forward, not in a threatening way at first, but like he was trying to act casual. He was older, maybe in his 40s, with short graying hair and wearing a black tracksuit and sneakers. He glanced at me, then started walking in the same direction, about 20 feet behind. I crossed the street. So did he. I slowed down. He slowed down. I sped up. His steps matched mine exactly. I didn't want to make a scene or act like I was overreacting, but my instincts were screaming at me. I turned down another street. He turned with me. I heard him say something, too low to make out at first. Then louder. "Hey, you know where the 7-Eleven is?" I didn't respond. I just kept walking. He tried again. "You look like you know the area. I'm trying to find Alberta Street." I glanced back. He smiled. Something about it wasn't right. The street was empty except for us. I pulled my phone from my pocket, but didn't unlock it. Just held it in my hand like I might call someone. He moved a little closer. "You need a ride? I'm parked just around the corner. It's a long walk. I don't mind." I didn't answer. I picked up my pace again, almost a jog now. He kept talking, voice still light, like he was trying to sound helpful. "You don't gotta be scared. I'm just offering." I didn't look back again. I could hear his footsteps behind me. Quick, deliberate. The houses on this block were darker, more spaced out. I didn't see anyone outside, and the porch lights were mostly off. I passed a narrow alley between 2 garages and turned sharply into it without thinking, hoping to lose him, or at least create some space. As soon as I did, I heard his steps break into a full run behind me. I pulled out my phone and held it to my ear like I was making a call. "Hey," I said loudly. "Yeah, I'm right around the corner. Are you still waiting for me?" "Okay, yeah, I see you. I'll be there in a minute." I spoke with more confidence than I felt. My phone had been dead for over an hour, But he didn't need to know that. I tried to make it sound like someone was just one block ahead. The man didn't flinch. He kept following, just a few steps behind. He raised his voice slightly, trying to sound casual. "You don't have to be nervous. I just live nearby. My daughter goes to your school. I help students all the time. You can wait for your friend at my place if you want. It's not safe out here alone." I didn't answer. I kept moving forward, glancing quickly at the street signs, trying to get my bearings. I spotted a gas station ahead, one of those 24-hour spots with bright lights and a red and white sign. There were usually people inside, even late. It was still 3 blocks away. I moved faster, trying not to make it obvious I was speeding up. Behind me, his footsteps quickened too. "I'm serious," he said louder, his tone shifting. "This area's not safe. You need someone looking out for you." I didn't break stride. "I'm good," I said firmly, still pretending to talk into my phone. "He's right there. I see him." The man kept going. "You don't have to lie. I know you're scared. But I'm not a bad guy." I kept walking. My hand was shaking so hard I could barely hold my phone up. He was closer now. I could hear his breathing, heavier, more deliberate. The street was too quiet, no cars passing, no one walking dogs. Just me, him, and the soft buzzing of distant street lamps. I reached the corner and crossed toward the gas station. The lights were bright now, fluorescent and harsh, bouncing off the windows. I could make out the figure of a man inside near the counter. I moved faster. The man behind me sped up too. Just as I reached the edge of the parking lot, I felt his hand close around my upper arm. "Hey!" That's all he got out. The gas station door opened and a man stepped outside, tall and heavy-set, with a gray beard and a reflective vest. I recognized him instantly. It was the night guard who always stood by the front in the mornings when I grabbed coffee before class. He looked straight at me, then at the man holding my arm. "Something wrong here?" His voice was deep, calm, but sharp. The man let go instantly. No, it's fine," he mumbled. "Just a misunderstanding. She dropped something, I thought." The guard stepped forward, putting himself between us. "I don't think she dropped anything," he said. "You should get moving." The stranger hesitated, eyes darting between us. Then he stepped backward, turned, and walked off into the night. Not fast, just like he didn't want to seem rushed. I stood frozen, staring after him, heart pounding in my ears. The guard turned to me. "You know him?" I shook my head. "You want me to call the cops?" I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. I felt like my legs might give out. He nodded slowly, like he understood. "Come inside. Sit down for a minute." I followed him in. He poured me a cup of water and watched me quietly while I sat on the plastic bench near the coffee machine. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. He didn't push me to talk, just stood near the counter and kept one eye on the window. After a few minutes, he said, "You getting home from that music thing?" I nodded. "Want me to call a cab for you?" I nodded again. My voice still wouldn't work right. He picked up the store phone and dialed. After hanging up, he pulled a few bills out of his pocket. "Don't worry about the fare," he said. "I'll cover it." I tried to protest, but he shook his head. "You just get home safe." We waited outside together under the bright lights. He stood next to me, not saying much, just watching the street. After 10 minutes, a yellow cab pulled up. The guard opened the door for me. "You all right?" I nodded. "Thanks," I said quietly. He gave a small nod and watched as I climbed in. As we pulled away, I looked back and saw him still standing there, arms crossed, eyes scanning the street. A week later, I was scrolling through local news when I saw the headline, police investigating series of attacks on women in Northeast Portland. My stomach dropped as I read the article. 3 separate incidents, all happening late at night, all involving a man in his 40s, wearing dark athletic clothes, approaching women walking alone. Each time, he tried to lure them toward his car or his apartment. The victims described him the same way. Same tone, same method, same fake concern. One woman had been dragged behind a building and beaten before someone interrupted. Another had managed to run. The third had been hospitalized. There was a composite sketch based on one of the women's descriptions. I stared at it for a long time. The tracksuit, the short gray hair, the way the jaw clenched. It was him. No question. I closed my laptop. My heart was racing again, just like that night. I knew how close I'd come. If the gas station hadn't been there, if that guard hadn't stepped outside right then, my story might have ended the same way as theirs, or worse. Since then, I never walk home alone at night. I carry pepper spray. I keep a phone charger with me at all times. I take ride shares, even when it means skipping lunch the next day. I don't care, because now I understand. Predators don't always jump out of the dark. Sometimes they talk like they're doing you a favor. Sometimes they smile. But real danger doesn't look like a monster. It looks like someone normal, someone helpful, someone who tells you you're overreacting. What saved me that night wasn't luck. It was timing. The right person in the right place, willing to step forward and do something. That's the only reason I made it home. When I was 24, I worked as a night shift manager at a 24-hour supermarket just outside Dallas. It was a decent gig. The pay wasn't amazing, but I didn't mind the hours. I preferred quiet. The overnight shift suited me. No kids screaming, no packed aisles. Just a few regulars. Nurses grabbing snacks after their shifts. Truckers passing through. The occasional college kid buying energy drinks and frozen burritos at 2 a.m. Most nights were completely uneventful. Sometimes I'd walk the aisles just to stretch my legs or restock shelves myself if one of the clerks called out. That Tuesday night started the same as any other. I clocked in a little before midnight, grabbed a coffee from the break room, then did the usual check of the store. All doors locked, loading dock clear, lights on in all the right places. Around 3 a.m., I was walking past the canned goods when I noticed an older man lingering in the cereal aisle. Nothing odd about that by itself, except he seemed to be hiding. Literally hiding. Ducking behind displays, moving quickly whenever I came into view. At first I thought maybe he was just confused or embarrassed. Maybe he had some kind of social anxiety. But the more I watched him, the weirder it got. He never stayed in one spot more than a minute or two. He'd shuffle down an aisle, glance around, then quickly sidestep behind a shelf or end cap if he noticed anyone nearby. I walked toward him casually, like I was doing a lap, and as soon as he saw me coming down the pet food aisle, he turned and hurried away toward frozen foods. The guy had on a tan jacket that looked about 2 sizes too big and stained like it hadn't seen a washing machine in months. Ball cap pulled low over his eyes. Every time I tried to get close enough to speak to him, he slipped away like he knew the layout better than I did. He'd drift near the coolers, then veer off into the hygiene section, always avoiding direct lines of sight with the cameras. That's when it started to click. This wasn't just some random older man being strange. He was actively avoiding being seen, by staff, by other shoppers, and definitely by the store's surveillance system. I followed him discreetly, watching from a few aisles over. He wasn't shopping. That's what really stuck out. He'd pick up random items, rice, shaving cream, a soup can, and just hold it. Look at the label for a second, then set it back down and keep moving. He never took a cart or basket, never looked at prices, just moved from section to section like he was waiting for something. For about 30 minutes this went on. Every few minutes I'd try to position myself to cut him off, but he was always one step ahead. It became a quiet little game of cat and mouse, except I wasn't playing for fun. I didn't know if I should call the police yet. He hadn't done anything technically wrong, but the whole situation had a tension to it I couldn't explain. Something about the way he kept glancing behind him, or standing too still between shelves, like he was listening for something I couldn't hear. One time I passed him in the dairy aisle and pretended not to notice him, just to see what he'd do. He didn't even pretend to shop, just watched me until I turned the corner, then slipped into the next row like he was avoiding being followed. I started thinking maybe he was trying to shoplift. That would explain the nervous behavior. But he wasn't pocketing anything, and he still hadn't taken anything toward the front to pay for. It wasn't about grabbing items and sneaking out. It felt more like surveillance, like he was looking for someone, or scoping the layout. I told Kyle, one of the clerks, to keep an eye on the security monitors while I tried to corner the guy near the pharmacy section. But right before I reached the end of the aisle, the man pivoted and walked quickly toward the front doors. Didn't run, didn't rush. Just a calm, steady walk like he'd decided he was done here. He didn't make eye contact with me or anyone else as he passed through the self-checkout lanes. He didn't buy anything. Not a stick of gum, not a bottle of water. Just walked straight out into the night. I followed behind, stopping just short of the exit to avoid spooking him. Through the wide glass doors, I could see him move through the empty parking lot. Not toward a car, just walking, slowly, out past the light poles, out beyond the row of carts, until he disappeared into the dark. I couldn't stop thinking about him. Even after I got home that morning and lay in bed trying to sleep, my mind kept circling back to the way he looked next to my truck. Not just the clothes, though that alone was bizarre, but the posture, the expression, the complete shift in body language. Inside the store, he was jittery, evasive, hunched over like he wanted to disappear. Out in the lot, he stood straight, spoke clearly, smiled like a man who'd never once ducked behind a cereal display. During my break, I stepped outside and scanned the lot again. Nothing. Just the same cracked pavement and flickering light over the edge of the building. But my truck was exactly how I left it. Locked up, no damage, no sign that anything had happened. Still, I walked the perimeter, checking nearby vehicles just in case. That's when I saw it. Lying face down under the hedge near the edge of the employee parking area, a crumpled baseball cap. Same one the guy wore in the store. It was stained, smelled like sweat and something worse. I left it there and went back inside, trying to shake the feeling in my chest. I didn't say anything to the cashier on shift. Didn't even check the security footage. Something about it all made me want to pretend it hadn't happened. But it gnawed at me, the way he had shifted from one person to another like flipping a switch. The clean shirt, the combed hair, none of it made sense. People don't just transform like that between cereal aisles and parking lots. The weirdest part was how normal he sounded when he spoke. He didn't slur or stutter. His story about the broken car was smooth, rehearsed. Too rehearsed. Like he'd told it 100 times before. But I kept thinking, if I hadn't seen him creeping around the store an hour earlier, I probably would have believed him. That thought bothered me more than anything else. The next night I came in early. I checked the lot first before my shift started, just in case. Nothing unusual. I even checked the camera system around the time I saw him last. He'd slipped out without being caught on any of the outdoor feeds. Probably knew where the blind spots were. Around 2:45 a.m., I started doing a walkthrough again. slow lap past canned goods and beverages, scanning for anything out of place. I didn't expect to see him again. Honestly, I didn't even want to. But part of me was still on edge. When I got to the cereal aisle, it was empty. Everything where it should be. No shadows ducking behind displays. I looped past the freezer section, checked the back corner near pet supplies, then stopped at the employee-only exit to smoke a quick cigarette. That's when I saw headlights. Dim ones, low to the ground. A car creeping slowly into the far corner of the lot with its lights off. It stopped 3 rows over, engine idling. I squinted, but couldn't see the driver. 5 minutes later, someone got out. It was him. I recognized the walk this time. Confident, steady steps. Not the jumpy gait from the night before. He wore a completely different outfit now. Slacks, tie, dress shoes, like he'd come from an office meeting. He walked up to the store, turned near the main entrance, then disappeared around the corner. I flicked my cigarette and stepped back inside. Didn't tell anyone. Just watched from the break room monitor as he circled the building once, then got back in his car and drove off. That's when I knew for sure. He was choosing people. Not just wandering, not just looking for help. He was scouting. The next night, I parked closer to the store. Didn't take any chances. I started locking the office door too. By 3:15, the lot was mostly empty again. Just me, the cashier, and 2 customers wandering near produce. I stayed near the front registers. Then at 3:33, he walked in again. This time he didn't sneak around. He walked straight through the sliding doors, headed down aisle 6, and grabbed a bottle of water. He stood in line, waited calmly behind a woman buying gum, then handed over exact change and left. He didn't say a word to anyone. Didn't look at me. Didn't glance at the cameras. Just walked back out and into the darkness. That night, I filed an incident report, not because he stole anything or caused a scene, but because I needed there to be a record of him. I pulled the footage from the parking lot and made a copy. Logged his license plate from the overhead shot. By the time the police ran it the next day, the car had already been flagged in 3 different counties for suspicious activity. 2 attempted carjackings, 1 robbery, 1 case still open with no details released. They said his name wasn't Robert. The ID he used at the last scene didn't exist. The car was registered under a woman's name, reported stolen 2 weeks ago. He was still out there. I still see him in my head sometimes. The way his eyes shifted when I turned down the ride request, like a mask slipping for half a second. Not angry, just recalculating. I started parking in lit areas, always locked up. Changed shifts eventually. Moved to daytime stalking just to feel less exposed. Some nights, I'll still check out the lot before I leave, out of habit. Haven't seen him again. But I keep a spare key in my sock now. And I never, ever believe a stranger's story on the first try. Because people like that, people who can switch faces like flipping a light, they're not asking for help. They're waiting for you to open the door. So when I was 19 and a sophomore at Georgia State, I got a job at a big sporting goods store in downtown Atlanta. The night shifts from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. were perfect for my class schedule, and the pay was better than most student jobs. My duties involved restocking merchandise after the store closed to customers, usually working with a team of 4 or 5 other employees spread across the massive sales floor. The work was pretty mindless, but gave me time to think about upcoming exams and assignments. Most nights passed without incident, just moving boxes and organizing inventory in the quiet store. The store itself was huge, 2 floors, plus a back warehouse, and a long corridor that ran behind the dressing rooms. We mostly worked in silence, sometimes chatting over the radios clipped to our belts if someone needed help moving a pallet or checking if a section was done. During my second week on the job, I was restocking athletic shoes near the front corner of the store when a man in a gray tracksuit walked up to me around 1 a.m. I didn't hear him approach, just turned, and there he was, standing maybe 5 feet away. I was surprised, but not immediately alarmed. Sometimes we had drivers drop off early morning deliveries, or managers doing late inventory checks. But he didn't have a name tag, a badge, or even one of the handheld scanners everyone else used. He looked around 30, medium build, stubble on his face, and he kept scratching his neck like he was irritated or anxious. The guy seemed nervous and kept glancing around as he asked me to show him where the warehouse was. I paused for a second, wondering if he was a temp or from a third-party vendor. I assumed he was either a new employee from a different shift or maybe a delivery driver, since the store was obviously closed to regular customers. No customers should have been inside. But he didn't seem drunk or high, just jumpy. I noticed he was looking up at the security cameras, scanning the ceiling every few seconds like he was trying to figure out where they were pointed. He didn't have a name tag or company shirt, but that wasn't unusual for overnight workers who often wore casual clothes. Something about his fidgety behavior made me uncomfortable, but I didn't want to be rude to a potential coworker. I nodded, told him I could show him where the warehouse entrance was, and started walking toward the back of the store. The hallway to the warehouse was behind the break room, past the employee lockers. As I walked, I kept explaining that the main warehouse door was usually locked and that the supervisor on shift had the key card. He stayed close behind me, too close, almost shoulder to shoulder at times, and kept glancing up at the cameras as we passed under them. At one point, he asked, "You think these things record sound too?" in this quiet voice, like he was half talking to himself. That was the first thing that made my skin crawl a little. I said, "I don't know, probably not," and kept walking. The hallway was dim. Half the lights back there always flickered or didn't turn on unless you waved your hand under them. We passed the vending machines and I noticed he wasn't wearing a name badge on his belt either. I tried to slow down a little, thinking maybe I could get him to walk ahead of me. I made some excuse, said I needed to check my radio for messages, and stepped to the side. He didn't take the lead though. Just stopped too. Stood there scratching his arm, eyes darting toward the break room door. We were alone in that back corridor. I could hear the low hum of the refrigerators from the break room and the ticking of the wall clock. My heart was starting to beat faster, not full panic, but definitely not normal. I tapped my radio button and said something into it, didn't matter what, just to see if he reacted. He glanced down at the radio, then back at the door. "You work in the back much?" he asked, almost casually. His eyes never met mine. "No," I said. "I usually stick to the floor. Shoes, sportswear." He nodded, like that answered something for him. I wanted to turn around and head back, say I forgot I had to finish something in another section. But he was standing between me and the main aisle now, just close enough that I'd have to brush past him. "I don't think anyone's back there right now," I said, hoping that would make him stop following me. He mumbled something I didn't catch, then reached into his pocket, pulled out a set of keys, and jangled them once, like he wanted me to know he had them. That's when I stopped walking completely. I said, "Hey, you said you're a delivery guy, right? From the morning crew?" He didn't answer, just stared at the door like he was waiting for something. Instead of heading to the warehouse, he suddenly turned and motioned sharply toward the cash registers up front. I hesitated, but he pushed forward like he'd already decided what was next. He kept glancing over his shoulder like someone was watching him, but now his steps were faster, heavier. He looked around the dark aisles as if trying to memorize them. Then he said, "Let's go. Cash drawers. Now." I didn't move at first. He stopped walking, turned toward me, and reached into his jacket pocket. He didn't take anything out, but he kept his hand in there, clenched around something. "Don't make this worse," he said. "Don't be stupid." I stared at him. He wasn't fidgeting anymore. His voice was low, not shaking. Everything about him changed. His posture, his tone, even his eyes. I couldn't see a weapon, but the way he was gripping whatever was in his pocket told me it didn't matter. I started walking. The store was dead quiet. The only sounds were the ceiling fans and the soft echo of our footsteps on the polished floor. I led him toward the registers near the main entrance. The lights above that section were dimmed, but you could still make out the cash wrap area and the registers behind the counters. He told me to get behind one and open it. I didn't. I told him straight, "I can't open those. I don't have a code or a key." He stepped closer. "You think I'm playing around? Open it." "I'm not lying," I said. "The registers lock automatically at closing. Only managers have the code. It's not even in the system." He squinted at me like he was trying to figure out if I was bluffing. "There's always a way. Don't lie to me." "I'm not," I said, keeping my hands out where he could see them. "They shut down as soon as the store closes. I couldn't get in if I tried. I just do stocking." He looked at the cash drawer, then at the cameras above. "Bullshit," he muttered. He circled the register, checking underneath it, jiggling the card reader like it might open something. Then he slammed his fist on the counter and walked up to me again, his hand still buried in his jacket pocket. "You're gonna regret this," he said. I took a step back but didn't say anything. My mouth was dry. I kept watching his hand. It was pressed tight against something hard under the fabric. I still didn't know what it was. That's when I saw movement out of the corner of my eye. One of the overnight workers, Carla, was walking past the front of the store toward the entrance. She was holding a box of clearance tags and looked up just as she passed the cash wrap. Her eyes landed on us, him standing way too close to me backed up against the counter. She slowed down, then she stopped. He didn't notice her at first. He was still focused on me. But Carla's expression changed, and I could see it register on her face. Something was off. She dropped the box and turned around quickly. She disappeared into the hallway that led to the break room, probably heading straight for the landline next to the lockers. That's when he saw her. "Who was that?" I didn't answer. He turned, looking around the store like he expected someone to come running. His jaw clenched. What did she see? What the hell did she see? I didn't move. I just watched him start to fall apart. He ran both hands through his hair, muttering to himself, then looked back at the emergency exit near the customer service counter. Without another word, he turned and sprinted for it. He knocked over a stack of tennis racket boxes on the way, slipped slightly but caught himself. The door made this loud metal bang as it flew open and slammed shut behind him. Then nothing. Just silence again. The box Carla had dropped still lay on the floor, clearance stickers scattered everywhere. I stood there for a few seconds, then slowly walked back toward the hallway. A couple of other employees peeked out as I passed. I told them to stay back, that he was gone, and that security was on the way. 10 minutes later, security showed up. They took me into the back to get my statement, and the store manager, who'd been called at home, arrived shortly after. The police came not long after that. They took a copy of the camera footage and pulled still images from every angle they could. I sat in the break room filling out paperwork until almost sunrise. We learned later that he'd hidden in one of the fitting rooms before we even started our shift. Probably during the changeover between the closing staff and us, when the doors were unlocked and people were still moving around. He'd stayed silent for over 2 hours, waiting for a chance to catch someone off guard. The surveillance footage showed him ducking into the back fitting room near the yoga pants section, pulling the curtain closed, then not coming out until nearly 1 a.m. He walked the floor calmly at first, staying in the shadows, avoiding cameras. Then he saw me in the shoe aisle. They caught him 3 days later. The police used facial recognition from the security footage and matched him to a known petty thief with a history of armed robbery, except he'd never actually used a real weapon. When they found him, he still had the same gray tracksuit and the fake weapon in his pocket. It was a screwdriver wrapped in a black rag. Looked like a gun when he held it under the fabric. He confessed. Said he'd planned the whole thing but panicked when he realized the registers were locked. He thought we'd be easy targets during night shift. I stayed on at the store, but I never walked that floor the same way again. Every night before closing, I checked every fitting room myself. I looked under the benches, pulled every curtain back. I still do it, even when I'm not the one closing. I just can't leave it to chance anymore. It happened last year when I was working as a delivery driver for QuickBite while studying at community college in Phoenix. The job was flexible and paid well enough to cover my textbooks and gas money. I mostly did evening shifts because they worked better with my class schedule, and most deliveries were straightforward. Pick up the order, drop it off, maybe get a decent tip if the customer felt generous. Saturdays were usually busier than other days, and the later shifts sometimes took me into rougher parts of town. I didn't mind it much. Just kept my doors locked, stayed aware, and avoided getting out of the car more than I had to. But that one Saturday night was different. The order came in at 10:41 p.m. It was from Fresh Mart, which handled groceries, not fast food, so right away that stood out. $85 worth of items: milk, bread, 2 rotisserie chickens, bottled water, paper towels, some cleaning supplies. Not your typical late-night snacks or convenience stuff. It looked more like someone was stocking up for a week, which was rare at that hour. The delivery address was 47 Maple Court, a place I'd never been to before. My app showed it was located in a development called Willows Creek. I'd never even heard of it. Google Maps showed a big, mostly unfinished neighborhood at the edge of the city limits. Most of the roads were still marked as unpaved. The customer didn't leave a tip ahead of time, which usually meant they'd give cash at the door. But the note on the order said, "Leave items at front door. No need to knock or ring." I accepted the delivery because it was a quiet night, and I was already nearby. Plus, I wanted to hit my quota. The drive out to Willows Creek took about 20 minutes. Past the last set of streetlights, everything got darker. The houses thinned out, then disappeared. Eventually, I was surrounded by patches of desert and half-finished roads. My car bumped along gravel and dust as I followed the GPS into the development. The map showed the streets, but the pavement didn't exist yet. Just dirt tracks and scattered construction cones. There were no lights except for the occasional portable floodlight at work zones. Maple Court was at the far end. When I turned onto it, the street was empty except for one structure at the dead end. It was a 2-story house, but clearly still under construction. The walls were mostly covered in that plastic wrap they use before laying siding. There was no driveway yet, just tire ruts and loose gravel leading up to the front. Piles of wood and pallets of brick sat beside the frame. A portable toilet leaned sideways on the edge of the lot. The windows were all dark. No porch light. No house number, just an empty-looking shell sitting quiet under the moon. I double-checked the address. 47 Maple Court. It was the only structure even remotely close to a finished home. I parked out front and kept the engine running while I looked again at the notes. Leave items at front door. No need to knock or ring. There was no bell anyway. I left my headlights on and got out. The night was still and warm. I could hear insects buzzing nearby and the crunch of gravel under my shoes. I opened the trunk and started carrying the groceries up to the plywood platform that served as a porch. The bags were heavy, so I did it in 3 trips. On my second trip back to the car, I thought I heard something faint coming from behind the neighboring lot. Like voices, but muffled. I stopped walking and listened. Nothing at first. Then again, low, quick bursts of sound, too soft to make out words. Laughter, maybe? Or people talking through a wall. But there was no wall. Just an open lot with stacks of wood and a cement mixer lying on its side. I squinted toward the direction of the sound, but couldn't see anything. No movement, no light. Just shadows. I picked up the last 2 bags and hurried to the porch. My shoes kicked up dry dust as I went. I set the bags down next to the others and used my phone to take a photo, as required by the app. The screen flashed once, and I checked the pic. Groceries at the doorstep of a house that wasn't finished. It felt strange to leave food for someone in a place that had no electricity, no sign of occupancy. But maybe it was a contractor or someone living on site illegally. Not my business. I turned back to the car, phone still in my hand. The voices sounded again, closer this time, coming from the left side of the construction site next door. I stopped mid-step. It wasn't loud, but something about the sound felt wrong, urgent. Not like guys joking around on a break. I scanned the area with my phone's flashlight. The beam danced over the construction materials, metal beams, a pile of bricks, some folded ladders. There was a low wall of cinder blocks outlining a future garage or driveway, but no people, no tools running, no lights. As I stood there, a soft clinking sound came from behind the stack of lumber near the edge of the house, like metal tapping on metal, followed by a faint rustling, quick and then gone. I stared into the shadows, waiting. My heart picked up speed. I slowly backed toward my car, keeping the light pointed in that direction. My fingers reached for the driver's side handle, and I opened the door without turning away from the sound. I got in, shut the door, and locked it immediately. My headlights lit up the dirt road ahead. For a second, I sat there, watching. And that's when I saw movement, just a flicker, at the far edge of the unfinished lot. A silhouette moved from behind one stack of drywall to another, not running, walking slowly, deliberately. Too far to see the face, just a shape, tall, dark clothes. Then, from the other side of the site, another figure moved, barely visible in the dim light, stepping across an open patch and disappearing behind a portable generator. I didn't wait to see more. I shifted into drive and pulled away, tires crunching over the dirt as I sped back toward the main road. Walking back to my car, I could feel something was off. At first, it was just a hunch, like when someone walks behind you for a little too long. But then I saw them. 2 figures, half concealed behind a stack of lumber near the half-built frame of the neighboring house. They weren't doing anything, not waving or yelling. Just standing there, still and quiet. I slowed for half a second and squinted, trying to see if maybe they were workers. But no one pours concrete or hangs drywall at 11 o'clock at night. And they weren't dressed for it either. No reflective vests, no hard hats. Just dark clothes and the kind of posture that tells you someone doesn't want to be seen. I picked up my pace. The gravel crunched louder under my shoes as I moved faster toward the car. I didn't run, didn't want to draw more attention than necessary, but I didn't linger either. I reached into my pocket and got my keys ready, eyes flicking back toward the stack of lumber. They hadn't moved much, but I could sense it. Little shifts, a step forward, one figure repositioning slightly, as if circling slowly, watching for an opening. My hands fumbled with the key fob as I reached the driver's side door. I missed the button the first time and dropped the keys. Bent down, grabbed them with shaky fingers, then clicked unlock. The car beeped once and I yanked the door open and slammed it shut behind me. I jammed the key into the ignition, started the engine, and threw it into reverse. As the headlights swung across the lot, I saw one of them step forward, right out from the shadows. Just a glimpse. Tall, hoodie pulled tight, something shiny in one hand. I didn't stick around to see more. But as I turned onto the dirt road and started to accelerate, something felt wrong. The steering was off, like I was pulling to the left, and the whole vehicle felt sluggish, almost as if I was dragging something. A second later, the rear started to wobble. That's when I knew. Something was wrong with the tires. I slowed down but kept going, forcing the car forward despite the shaking. I didn't want to stop until I had some distance. My eyes flicked between the mirrors and the dark shapes of the construction lots behind me. No headlights, no one running after me. Still, I couldn't risk it. I drove for another half-mile, tires grinding and flapping against the dirt, before I finally pulled over under a weak street lamp near the edge of the development. I got out and crouched behind the car. Both rear tires were shredded, not a little leak, completely flattened. As I got closer, I saw what looked like metal lodged deep into the rubber. Long nails. Maybe screws. I checked around and sure enough, just behind the tracks where I'd pulled away, I spotted one of those construction boards. It had nails sticking straight up. They didn't fall there by accident. I got back in the car, heart still racing, and limped it down the road at a crawl. Maybe 10 miles an hour. I didn't care about the rims. I just needed to get out of there. After what felt like forever, I reached the first gas station with actual lights and people. I pulled into a pump lane and finally exhaled. I called my manager first, told her the order had been dropped off, but something was wrong with the address. She said she'd note it and remove the charge. I almost laughed. Then I called the police. They showed up 20 minutes later. 2 officers, one took notes while the other checked out my car. I gave them everything. The order details, the name, the time, the route, what I saw. The officer nodded slowly and told me they'd send someone to check out the location. An hour later, they called me back. The delivery address was a fake. The name didn't match any residents in the area. The credit card used was one of those prepaid kinds, the ones you buy at gas stations. Untraceable. No billing address, no customer info. The house was, as I'd seen, still under construction. Completely unoccupied. No surveillance cameras on site. But on the dirt road where I'd parked, they found 2 boards, each about 3 feet long, studded with long nails and hidden just under the gravel, right where a delivery car's rear tires would roll over them when backing in. Intentional. Precise. It wasn't just vandalism. It was a setup. The cops kept it quiet at first, but I followed up a week later and found out more. Turns out there had been other incidents. At least 3 delivery drivers in the past 2 months had reported flat tires or suspicious activity while dropping off late-night orders to fake addresses around the outskirts of town. Most of them chalked it up to bad luck. A few reported seeing people nearby but didn't stick around to find out more. One guy had his phone and wallet stolen when he went to change a tire. No injuries, thankfully. But the pattern was there. The police checked local construction sites and found that someone had been stealing materials, wood, screws, nails, from unsecured lots. There were no cameras nearby, but one site had an older model motion-activated trail camera tucked into a pole, the kind used for wildlife. It wasn't meant for security, but it happened to catch part of a license plate one night. They ran the plate, matched it to a truck registered to a guy with a long list of priors. Petty theft, trespassing, possession of burglary tools. A known problem. When they picked him up, he didn't deny much. Said he and his cousin were just trying to get something back. Claimed they only wanted to steal food, that they were desperate, that they never planned to hurt anyone. But the tools they found in the truck, zip ties, gloves, even a crowbar, told a different story. Both men were charged. Attempted robbery, conspiracy, tampering with a vehicle. It wasn't enough to keep them locked up forever, but it was enough to scare me straight out of the job. I didn't go back to QuickBite after that. Told my manager I was done, left my delivery bag in the back room, and never logged into the app again. A week later, I found a barista gig near my school. Same pay, better hours, and best of all, I stayed in one place. No late-night deliveries, no empty streets, no shadows and unfinished houses. And to this day, I still don't take food to unfamiliar addresses after dark. Not even as a favor. Not even for cash. Not after Maple Court. When I was 23, I worked as a night security guard at a covered parking garage in downtown Chicago. The job paid well for what it was, but 8 hours alone in a small booth watching video monitors was incredibly boring. The garage served an office complex, so after 7 p.m., there were hardly any cars left and almost no activity. I usually brought a book or played games on my phone to kill time, but mostly, I just sat there watching the screens for hours with nothing happening. In my year and a half on the job, the only incidents had been minor break-ins and one stolen motorcycle. Mostly, it was dead quiet. People didn't come down there late unless they worked late shifts or forgot something in their car. Even then, the place was well lit and had decent cameras on every floor, so nothing much ever happened. Honestly, I never even felt unsafe. That Wednesday night, I came in for my usual shift at 11. I was already running on low sleep after pulling an all-nighter to study for finals. I had an energy drink and a travel mug of coffee, but they weren't doing much. I remember thinking maybe I could just make it through to sunrise without nodding off. The garage looked as empty as usual when I did the first walkthrough around midnight. Only a couple cars on the first level, a few more scattered on levels 2 through 5, and nothing suspicious. By 2 a.m., I was slumped in my chair in the booth with the heaters running, staring at the monitors. One hand on the walkie, the other holding coffee that had gone lukewarm. I must have dozed off for just a few minutes because the next thing I knew, a loud bang shook me awake. The door of the booth slammed open hard enough to hit the wall behind it. I jumped up, heart racing. Wind was howling outside. I stepped over to the door, checked the lot, but no one was there. Just empty lanes of concrete, flickering fluorescent lights, and the sound of wind echoing down the ramps. I figured I must have forgotten to latch the door fully when I got in, and the wind blew it open. Still, I locked it properly this time, pulling on it twice to be sure. I went back to the monitors and decided to rewind the external cameras for the last 20 minutes to see if anything happened while I was out. I checked each level. Nothing. No movement, no vehicles, no people. Everything had stayed still except for the occasional flicker of lights from motion sensors or the wind jostling a hanging sign on the top level. The camera facing the entrance didn't show any cars or pedestrians coming or going. I got up again, made a fresh cup of coffee from the little single-cup brewer by the back window, and sat down. Just past 2:30, I was flipping through the feeds, half-focused, when something caught my eye on camera 3. That one covered the 3rd floor, a wide view of about 8 parking spaces near the elevator bank. At first, I thought it was a trick of the shadows, but then I saw him. A man was walking slowly between the cars. He had a long dark jacket, possibly a hoodie under it, and jeans. No backpack, no tools in his hand. But I saw him pause by a silver sedan, lean close, and try the door handle. Then he moved on to the next car and did the same. He checked windows, cupped his hands against the glass, moved along casually like he wasn't in a rush. I sat up straight and reached for the phone. We weren't supposed to approach anyone, just observe and report. I dialed the non-emergency police dispatch line we had on file and gave them the details. White male, maybe mid-30s, average build, moving between vehicles on level 3, trying doors. Dispatch said they'd send someone out and told me to stay on the line if he got into a car or left the garage. I kept my eyes on camera 3. The guy was still at it, walking like he had all night to kill. Every now and then he'd stop and glance around, but never directly at a camera. It was hard to tell if he knew he was being watched. After checking 6 or 7 cars, he walked over toward the elevator but didn't go in. Instead, he stood near a concrete pillar for a bit, mostly out of view. I switched to camera 4, which gave a side angle of the same floor. It showed just enough to see him pulling something from his coat pocket. Maybe gloves. He leaned over a car that looked like a dark Toyota, peered inside longer this time, then circled it slowly. I didn't see him break a window or do anything aggressive yet, but the way he was moving, deliberate, calm, it gave me a weird feeling. Not frantic or obviously dangerous, just too casual. Like he'd done this before. Back on the phone with dispatch, I gave them an update. The operator asked me to stay on the line in case he tried to leave. I told her I hadn't seen him near the ramp or elevator since. Then, suddenly, he disappeared off the frame. I switched to camera 5, which faced the opposite angle down the row. Nothing. I tried camera 6. Still nothing. For about 30 seconds, he just wasn't there anymore. Then he stepped out from behind a pillar I hadn't been watching. I could see him clearly now. He looked up briefly, not right at the camera, but close. I swear his expression didn't change at all. He walked to the far corner of the garage floor, just out of reach of the overhead lights, and stopped again. He stood there for a long time, not moving. The man moved from car to car like he knew exactly what he was doing. He'd pause beside each one, crouch a bit, do something with his hands, then move on. I couldn't see the details, but the way he worked, calm, practiced, it didn't look random. He wasn't checking out of curiosity. He was doing something specific to the locks or handles. I kept glancing between monitors, trying to catch a clearer angle, but the footage wasn't high quality. Too grainy in the low light. Still, I could tell he was getting more confident. The pauses grew shorter. His movements got quicker. Then he suddenly changed. He sprinted across the frame, heading toward the ramp. I quickly switched to the next level's camera and caught him bolting up to 4, then 5. At each level, he'd stop for less than a minute, repeat the same process, walk, crouch, move on, then dart off again. By the time he got to level 6, I noticed he started glancing up at the ceiling where the cameras were mounted. Maybe he hadn't realized there were so many, or maybe he finally figured he was being watched. Either way, he started moving faster. I called dispatch again and gave an update. He's heading down, moving quick, probably trying to leave before cops show up. They said officers were 2 minutes out. By the time I hung up, the guy had made it back to level 1. I caught him moving fast down the ramp on the east side. Then a few seconds later, I heard footsteps outside the booth. Slow, careful. Then a knock. It wasn't loud or aggressive. Just a soft, polite knock like someone asking for directions. I didn't move from the monitors. The angle of the external camera let me see him just outside the booth. Same jacket, same hood. He stood still, hands at his sides, and looked straight at the small side window. I pressed the intercom button. "Can I help you?" "Yeah," he said. His voice was calm, I can't find my car. I think I parked here earlier, but now I'm not sure which level. I didn't answer right away. My thumb hovered over the button. The garage is closed after hours. You'll need to contact building management in the morning. There was a pause. He shifted on his feet, glanced toward the ramp behind him, then back at the booth. I really need to get home, he said. Can't you just let me look around? I didn't respond. He waited a few more seconds, then moved to the door and tried the handle. Locked. He tugged it once, then leaned forward, peering through the narrow window like he was trying to get a look at my face. I stayed still. After about a minute, he stepped back and walked slowly around the booth. I followed his shape on the monitor. He circled once, tapping the window once with his knuckles, then turned and walked across the lot toward the emergency stairwell. I lost sight of him when he opened the door and disappeared inside. The garage was silent again. 9 minutes later, 2 officers arrived. I stepped out and gave them a quick rundown. They had me walk with them through every level. We didn't find him. No sign of movement, no hiding places. All the elevators were locked after hours, and the stairwell had no exit except to the sidewalk. He must have gone out that way and vanished. We did notice some of the vehicles had been tampered with. 4 cars had small, fresh scratches around the locks, and one had a slightly bent handle like someone had forced it. No broken windows, no alarms triggered. Just subtle signs that someone had been trying to break in without leaving a mess. One of the cops shone his flashlight under a nearby car on the 3rd floor and spotted something lying on the concrete. It was a small black case. Inside were 3 thin metal tools. Lockpicks. The officer nodded and slid them into a plastic bag. Looks like he dropped them in a rush, he said. Probably when he realized we were coming. They took a report and collected footage from the last few hours. The guy had kept his face turned down or away the entire time. Even in the best lit areas, his hood and the camera angles made it impossible to get a clear ID. No license plate, no name. He moved like someone who'd done this before. Over the next few days, building management made changes. Brighter lighting on every level. Motion-activated alarms installed near the stairwells and entrances. A new policy. Nobody without a valid access card after 10 p.m. They also added more cameras, with higher resolution. After that night, nothing else happened. No more scratches, no suspicious figures in the footage. Whoever that man was, he didn't come back. Maybe the police presence scared him off. Maybe he hit another garage somewhere else. But we never saw him again. The oddest part was thinking how easily it could have gone worse. If I hadn't woken up from the booth door slamming open, I might not have noticed anything. He might have had hours to work level by level, emptying cars quietly, undisturbed. I never left the door unlatched again. When I was 17, I needed money for college badly, so I downloaded this app that matched babysitters with families around Phoenix. It was like one of those basic apps where you make a profile, put your availability, and wait for someone to message you. I didn't have a car yet, so I picked a 5-mile radius around my house and kept checking the app every day. Nothing happened for like 2 weeks. Then, out of nowhere, I got a message on a Wednesday afternoon from someone named Mr. Johnson. He said he needed overnight babysitting for his 3-year-old son, Tommy, from Friday evening until Saturday noon. The pay was crazy good, $200 for one night. Most people on the app were offering like $10 an hour, tops. This felt too good to be true, but I was broke, and it seemed legit. His profile was verified, and he had some reviews from other sitters saying he was polite and paid on time. I messaged him back right away and said I was available. He replied in minutes, said he liked that I was close by, didn't smoke or party, and sounded responsible. We texted a bit, and then he asked if I could come by Friday at 9 p.m. sharp. I said sure. He gave me the address, nice neighborhood, close to a park. I didn't tell my parents much, just said I got a babysitting gig overnight, and I'd be back by lunch Saturday. They weren't strict or anything. My mom just reminded me to keep my phone charged, and my dad offered to drop me off if I didn't feel safe walking. I Googled the address. Big house, clean front yard, looked totally normal. I even found it on Google Street View and saw a toy car in the driveway. I told myself it would be fine. Friday night rolled around. I wore jeans and a hoodie and packed a charger and some snacks in my backpack. The Uber dropped me off right at 9 and the porch light was already on. I knocked, and Mr. Johnson answered immediately. He looked like a regular guy, probably mid-40s, tall, dark hair, clean-shaven, wearing jeans and a polo. He smiled like he was in a rush but still tried to be friendly. "Thanks for coming on short notice," he said, stepping back to let me in. The inside of the house was spotless. Not in a creepy way, just very tidy. Beige carpets, gray couches, a few toys tucked neatly in bins. Family pictures on the wall showed him and a little boy, looked like Tommy, at the zoo, on a swing set, stuff like that. Everything looked normal. We sat down in the living room for a bit, and he asked me a bunch of stuff, about my family, what school I went to, if I had siblings, what I wanted to study in college. I assumed he was just being careful, trying to make sure I wasn't some sketchy teenager. I told him I was thinking of doing nursing or maybe teaching. He nodded, seemed satisfied. Then he stood up and grabbed his keys off the counter. "Tommy's already asleep upstairs," he said. "Room at the end of the hall on the right. Please don't wake him. He gets nightmares." I said, "Okay." He paused for a second, looked toward the hallway, then back at me. "If he wakes up, just sit with him until he goes back to sleep. Don't pick him up." That part struck me as a little weird. I asked if he had trouble sleeping or if something had happened. He smiled again, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "He just has a rough time, but he's a sweet kid. Should sleep through the night." He told me there were snacks in the kitchen, TV remote on the coffee table, and his number was written on the notepad by the landline in case I needed anything. Then he left. I watched him get into his car and drive off. The street outside was quiet, a few porch lights on here and there, but no one walking around. I settled onto the couch and turned the TV on. It was past 9:30 now. I pulled out my phone, texted my mom that I got there safe, and then just sat watching some dumb sitcom with the volume low. Every few minutes I glanced at the hallway, half expecting to hear crying or footsteps upstairs, but the house stayed silent. Too silent, honestly. After maybe an hour, I stood up to stretch my legs. I thought about checking on Tommy, just peeking through the door to make sure everything looked normal. But I remembered what Mr. Johnson said, not to wake him under any circumstances. I figured I'd wait. He'd only been gone for a bit, and everything seemed fine. Still, I noticed the door at the end of the hallway was closed tight, like perfectly flush with the frame, no light under it. I listened for any movement. Nothing. Just the buzz of the fridge and the low hum of the TV. I walked into the kitchen to grab some water. The fridge was full, labeled containers, juice boxes, almond milk. There was a list taped to the fridge too. I leaned closer to read it. It looked like a feeding schedule or something, but most of it was crossed out. The dates didn't make sense though. They were from 2 months ago. The last one just said, Friday, 8 p.m., no sugar. That was it. I stepped back, confused. Why would you keep an old list like that up on the fridge? I opened a drawer to look for a spoon, and it was full of batteries, not utensils. Another drawer had only scissors and zip ties. I stood there for a second, not moving. The rest of the drawers were completely empty. I didn't know why, but it made my skin crawl. Something about it just felt off. I told myself maybe they had just moved in or something. But that didn't line up with the family pictures and the drawings taped to the fridge from what looked like a daycare. I went back to the living room and sat down again, trying to shake the weird feeling. The TV was still on, but I turned the volume down even lower so I could hear if anything moved upstairs. Still nothing. I glanced at the hallway again. That door was still shut. After he left, I kept pacing the downstairs rooms trying to make it feel normal. But something about the house just wasn't right. It looked clean, but not lived in. Like someone had gone through the motions of setting up a house without ever actually using it. The living room had a blanket folded over the couch, but no remote, no signs of actual use. There were no shoes by the door, no keys hanging anywhere, nothing personal on the counters. The bathroom by the stairs had a soap dispenser, but it was full and unused, like one of those staged homes for sale. I went back into the kitchen and opened every cabinet. No sippy cups, no kid plates. Just mugs, canned food, and 2 boxes of protein bars. One drawer had 3 flashlights and an unopened pack of batteries. I checked under the sink and found nothing but a brand new sponge and 2 empty spray bottles. That's when I looked at the family photos again. I had noticed them earlier but hadn't really studied them. Every photo was perfectly staged. Mr. Johnson standing next to the same woman, maybe 4 or 5 different outfits, same 2 rooms. No background noise, no clutter. The woman was never smiling. In one picture, her arm was by her side, but in the next one, it was stiffly wrapped around his back, like someone told her to pose. Not a single photo of a child. I kept staring at one where Mr. Johnson had his hand on her shoulder and realized she looked like she was holding her breath. It hit me then that maybe she didn't live here anymore, or maybe she never did. I checked my phone. Still no service. I even walked near the window trying to get a bar, but nothing. I decided to go upstairs. Every sound the carpet made under my feet felt like it echoed. I passed the first door on the left. It was the master bedroom. The door was open. Inside, the bed was made perfectly. The closet was open halfway, filled with men's shirts. All of them the same 2 or 3 colors. I opened the drawers of the nightstand. Empty. No alarm clock. No phone charger. I moved on to the next room. This one had nothing in it except 2 cardboard boxes pushed against the wall. I looked inside. One had folded towels still in plastic packaging. The other had picture frames with no photos in them. The last room down the hall had a twin bed, but the sheets were stiff and smelled faintly like dust. There were no toys, no books, nothing a child would keep in their room. No lamp, just a bare ceiling bulb. I touched the pillow, and a small cloud of dust lifted. The closet had a few empty hangers and a stack of old newspapers inside. I stepped back and just stared for a moment. There was no child here. There probably never was. I turned and hurried downstairs. I tried calling my mom again, but my phone was still dead silent. No bars, no signal. I even restarted it. Nothing. I thought about grabbing my backpack and leaving right away, but something made me hesitate. I couldn't explain it, just a gut thing. Like if I opened that front door and walked out, he'd be waiting in his car, or worse. I sat back down on the couch and kept the lamp on. I didn't turn the TV back on. I wanted to hear every sound in that house. I didn't even take off my shoes. Every few minutes, I checked the time on my phone. It was creeping toward midnight. Then 1. Then 2. The house made those occasional creaks that old houses do, but nothing more. Then, Around 2:30, I heard it. A click from the back door. Not loud, but unmistakable. Metal on metal, like someone using a key. I froze. The lock turned slowly, then the door eased open a few inches. I stayed perfectly still, half hidden behind the couch. Then I saw the silhouette step in. Tall, broad shoulders, moving slowly like he didn't want to be heard. It was Mr. Johnson. He was tiptoeing in, eyes fixed ahead like he expected to catch someone sleeping. But I was sitting up, wide awake. As soon as he turned and saw me staring directly at him, he stopped. For maybe 2 seconds, we just stared at each other. His whole expression shifted. I didn't wait. I grabbed my backpack, ran straight for the front door, flung it open, and didn't look back. I heard him yelling behind me, but I couldn't make out the words. I jumped off the porch, sprinted to the street, and didn't stop running until I reached the corner where the streetlight was. My phone still didn't have service, but I didn't care. I just kept going until I found another house with a porch light on and sat on the curb outside, pretending to be texting someone. After about 10 minutes, a car drove past slowly. Not him. I waited longer, then finally got a single bar. I called an Uber and got home just before 4 a.m. I didn't say anything to my parents that morning. I pretended I was tired but fine. For weeks, I tried to forget about it. I kept thinking maybe it was all a misunderstanding, but I couldn't explain why he lied about the kid, why the house was empty, why he tried to come back quietly through the back door. A month later, I told my mom everything. She was furious. My dad wanted to go to the police, so I did. They wrote it all down but said since nothing technically happened, there wasn't much they could do. The house was already listed as vacant by the time they went to check it out. No forwarding address. The app profile was gone. I never babysat again. Never used that app again. And even now, years later, I still think about that house. I still wonder what would have happened if I'd fallen asleep that night. So last month, this older guy, maybe 70 years old, knocked on our apartment door in Portland. He was wearing a worn-out army green jacket that looked like it hadn't been washed in years, and his jeans were baggy and stiff. He stood there with his hands deep in his pockets and introduced himself with a first name I forgot immediately. Said he was going to be our new neighbor next month, moving into Unit 3B down the hall. My husband Michael and I had lived in this building for just over 2 years, and we'd never seen him around once, not even in the parking lot or mailroom. Still, he seemed harmless at first. A little off maybe, but polite. He said the property management company gave him permission to walk around and get familiar with the layout before his move-in date. I'd never heard of them doing that before, but it wasn't so strange that it set off alarms. He mentioned how he had trouble with stairs sometimes and wanted to see how the elevators worked, how the units were arranged, stuff like that. His voice was calm and low, and there was a faint shake in his hands when he pulled out a little notepad. He asked if he could come in and ask a few questions, said he was trying to understand what kind of neighbors he'd have. Michael looked at me. I looked at him, and we just stepped aside and let the guy in. We try to be friendly, especially since most people in this building keep to themselves. He walked in slow, kind of hunched, and scanned everything. Our living room layout, the window, the thermostat. Then he sat on the edge of the armchair like he didn't plan to stay long. He started by asking what we pay for electricity and how well the insulation worked in winter. Said he hated being cold. Asked if the walls were thin, if we ever had problems with noise or bugs. All pretty standard stuff. Michael answered most of it while I refilled our water glasses. Then his question shifted. He asked Michael what he did for a living, and Michael told him he worked in data consulting. The guy nodded but didn't move on. He kept pressing, asking how long Michael had worked there, whether he did it from home, what company it was, how stable the job was. Michael was polite, tried to keep things vague, but the guy just kept going. He asked where Michael was from originally, and when Michael said Canada, the guy squinted like he didn't quite hear right. "Do you have work authorization?" he asked. Michael laughed, kind of taken off guard. "I've been a US citizen for 10 years, he said. "Still," the guy replied, "they probably needed documents, right? Like a green card before that? Or a visa?" I was sitting on the couch by then, and I remember the way he turned his head just slightly, like he was storing everything Michael said. He wasn't nodding along like someone making conversation. He was completely still, just staring. I asked if he worked in immigration or something, and he said no, just like to understand people. His notepad was still out, and though I never saw him write anything, it felt like he was recording us in his head. We wrapped up the conversation after that. Michael stood and said he had a call to take soon, which wasn't even true, but it got the guy up. He thanked us for our time and walked out without shaking hands. We watched him shuffle slowly down the hall, turning his head just once like he was checking which unit was which. After we shut the door, neither of us said anything right away. Then Michael turned to me and said, "That was weird, right?" I nodded. I kept thinking about how he'd watched everything. Like the way he looked around our apartment wasn't just curiosity. It was like he was taking inventory. Michael said he felt like he'd just been interviewed, but not in a casual way. More like he was being sized up for something. We talked about maybe calling the property manager to double-check his story, but we didn't follow through that night. Still, both of us agreed. Something didn't feel right about him. Not dangerous exactly, but definitely not normal. I decided to call our property manager, Sarah Thompson, the next morning. Michael was already at work, and I kept going over the conversation in my head while I waited for her to answer. When she picked up, I told her what happened. She asked me to describe the man, his age, clothes, what he said. I gave as many details as I could. She was quiet for a moment and then said, "There's no one like that in our system. No upcoming move-ins for that floor. The apartment next to you? That's already rented. A student named Tyler moved in back in May." I sat down. "So, he lied?" "Yeah," she said, her voice getting serious. "And he had no reason to be in the building at all. If he comes back, don't engage. Just call me right away." When I hung up, I felt my face flush with embarrassment. I'd opened the door. I'd let him sit down. We told him where Michael was from, what he did, how long we'd lived there. He saw the layout of our place, what kind of electronics we had, where we kept our keys. I started replaying the whole thing in my head with new eyes. His questions weren't curious. They were strategic. He wasn't just learning about neighbors. He was looking for weak spots. That night, I told Michael everything Sarah said. He didn't get angry, but I could tell it hit him too. He knew what he was doing, he said. Every question had a purpose. We made a rule. No one comes in unless Sarah confirms who they are first. No exceptions. The next day, I stayed home from work. Around 3 p.m., I heard a knock again. Not loud, not fast. Just 3 slow knocks, like the first time. I froze. I didn't say anything. I went to the peephole and looked. It was him. Same jacket, same stiff posture. He stood there like he'd done nothing wrong, like it was just a normal visit. But I didn't open the door. I grabbed my phone, hit record on our peephole cam, and stepped back. "Who is it?" I asked through the intercom. He cleared his throat. "Hey, I was just, I think we talked last week. I'm still moving in soon. Just wanted to check one more thing." We talked to Sarah. She said there's no move-in scheduled and no one's allowed to be walking around the building like that. There was a pause. Then he said, Oh, I must have gotten the wrong date. Sorry about that. He turned fast, almost too fast for someone his age, and walked down the hall without looking back. I kept recording until he disappeared around the corner. Michael got home 20 minutes later. We forwarded the video to Sarah immediately. She called the police herself and told us she'd notify the other tenants. That night, we printed off stills from the video and posted them in the lobby, the mailroom, by the elevator. We used plain wording. Do not allow this man into your unit. Not a tenant. Not authorized. The next morning, 3 other tenants knocked on our door. Each of them had talked to him too. Same story. Same fake introduction. He said he was moving into 3C, then 4B, then 5A. He asked each one questions about utilities, noise, jobs. One woman said he tried to peek into her kitchen drawers when she got up to check the thermostat. By the end of the week, we had answers. Sarah told us the man had been spotted in 3 other buildings within 5 blocks. Same jacket, same routine. The police had received 2 other reports from nearby property managers describing a man in his 60s or 70s asking strange questions, trying to get inside apartments. No ID, no real name, no record of application anywhere. Just walking in off the street, acting like he belonged. An officer came to our place to talk. He was calm, but serious. He told us the guy was probably casing apartments. They look for routines, he said. They figure out who lives alone, who's home during the day. They ask about immigration stuff sometimes because if you think someone's undocumented, you're less likely to report them. He looked over our door. Add a second deadbolt. Reinforce the strike plate. Don't answer for anyone unless your property manager confirms them. We did all of that the same day. Bought a better lock, replaced the screws with 3-inch ones, added a peephole cam that stored cloud footage. We even rearranged our living room so the TV couldn't be seen from the hallway window. Michael changed his work schedule so he worked from home a couple of days a week. We also started checking in with our neighbors more. Simple things like asking if they saw anything weird or had anyone come to their door. It still eats at me how easy it was. How simple it was for him to knock, smile, and walk right in. He didn't threaten us. He didn't push. He just acted like he belonged, and that was enough. Now, every time someone knocks unexpectedly, I feel my stomach drop. We don't open doors anymore without checking. We don't assume anything. We don't trust stories that don't add up. Because the truth is, he was never a neighbor. He was never moving in. He just wanted to get inside and see what he could take. And we made it way too easy for him. When I was a senior in college, I met this guy Brad at a party. He was standing near the kitchen with a red cup in one hand and his phone in the other. I had just walked in with a few classmates after a late lab, and I wasn't in the mood to talk to anyone. But he kind of just smiled at me and said something about liking my jacket. It wasn't anything special, just a thrifted denim one I always wore. We ended up talking for a bit, maybe 45 minutes or an hour. He said he was 23, studying business, and doing an internship at a marketing company downtown. It was small talk, classes, professors we both thought were full of themselves, future job plans, the usual. He had this way of listening that didn't feel fake. He asked a lot of questions, but not in a weird way, just normal stuff. At one point he asked what year I was, and I told him I was a senior majoring in environmental science. He asked what I wanted to do after graduation, and I gave my usual half joke about hopefully not living with my parents. Before I left, he said we should stay in touch, asked if I had Instagram. I handed him my phone, he typed his handle in, followed himself, and then followed me back from his own phone. I didn't think much of it. I already had a boyfriend at the time. We'd been together for almost a year, and it wasn't like I was out looking for anything. Brad messaged me the next day, said it was nice talking to me. A few days later, he replied to one of my stories with a comment about the book I was reading. I replied with a short message. I didn't want to be rude. The messages stayed casual for the first week or so. He asked about my classes, sent me a meme once, and reacted to a couple of my stories. It was friendly. I figured maybe we'd run into each other on campus again and say hi. But then things shifted. One morning I woke up to a message from him that just said, "You looked really good in your last post." It was a selfie I'd taken while studying at the library. I responded with a polite thanks and didn't say anything else. That same afternoon, he messaged again, asking if I was free to hang out sometime soon. I replied that I had a boyfriend, but I appreciated the compliment and wanted to keep things friendly. He didn't respond for a few hours, then just liked the message. The next day, he sent a longer message. It was maybe 6 or 7 lines, all about how he thought I was different and how he couldn't stop thinking about our conversation. He said it didn't matter that I had a boyfriend because sometimes two people just connect and it's meant to be. I didn't respond. The messages didn't stop though. He started sending more of them, one every day, sometimes more than one. They'd start out normal. "How's your day going?" Or, "Have you been to that new coffee place near campus?" But they always ended up circling back to how he thought we should be together. One night, I got a string of messages that were basically a rant about how he could treat me better, how I deserved more, how my boyfriend probably didn't even appreciate me. That night, I showed the messages to my roommate. She scrolled through them and looked at me like, "This guy's getting weird." I agreed. I blocked him on Instagram the next morning. Then I deleted his number from my phone. I didn't want to deal with it. I figured once I blocked him, that would be the end of it. A few days after I blocked him, I got a new message request on Instagram from an account with no profile picture and a random username. I knew it was Brad. The message didn't start with a hello. It jumped right into anger. He said, "You think you can block me? I know where you live." Then he typed out my exact dorm address, including my room number. My stomach dropped. I never told him where I lived. There was no way he could have known unless he'd been asking around or worse, following me. I stared at the message for a long time before I blocked the new account. I sat on my bed, shaking a little, rereading what he'd written. The way he said it, calm and direct. It didn't feel like a bluff. A minute later, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. It said, "Blocking me won't change what's real. You'll see." Then another one. "I'm going to make you understand. You're not leaving me." I started taking screenshots of everything, every message, every account. I showed them to Jason that night. He didn't say much at first, just kept scrolling through my phone. Then he asked if Brad had ever come to my dorm before. I said no. He said, "Then he's either been following you, or he's been talking to someone who lives here." Over the next few days, it got worse. The messages came in faster, from new numbers and new accounts, like he was going out of his way to get past every block I put up. Some were calm, trying to convince me we were meant for each other. Others were threatening. "You can't hide forever. You walk to class at 10:15 every morning. You wear those black sneakers. I see everything." He described which path I took past the library, which side of the dining hall I usually sat on. He knew too much. One night I got a message that said, "I'm outside." I looked out the window. My dorm faced a big courtyard with a few trees and benches. Nothing looked off, no one standing around. That made it worse. He could have been anywhere. I called campus security right away and told them everything. While I waited, I texted Jason to come over and grab the pepper spray from my desk drawer. I had no idea if Brad was bluffing or watching from somewhere nearby. When security arrived, they told me to stay in my room and sent a patrol around the building. About 10 minutes later, they called me back. They'd found someone near the side entrance, standing behind the bike racks. It was Brad. They escorted him off campus. He didn't fight or yell, just followed their instructions, according to the officer who followed up. I filed a formal report that night and brought in all the screenshots the next morning. Jason came with me to the dean's office. I didn't say much during the meeting, just handed over my phone and let the woman in charge go through everything. She didn't look surprised. She said they had a zero-tolerance policy for stalking and harassment. 2 weeks later, Brad was officially expelled. The university sent me a written statement saying he was no longer allowed on any university property and that campus security had been notified. My RA offered to move me to a different room, and I took it. Jason started walking with me between classes. I stopped going anywhere alone after dark. The rest of the semester passed quietly. I never heard from Brad again. But I still checked behind me more often. I stopped tagging locations in real time on social media. I double-checked the locks every night. It taught me how fast a normal situation can go bad. Brad seemed like any other guy at first. He was friendly, smart, confident. The kind of guy you'd think nothing of giving your Instagram to at a party. But the scariest part wasn't the threats. It was how quickly he learned things I hadn't told him. My schedule, my room number, where I ate. People don't need much to find out where you are and when. Just a few details, a few observations. You don't even realize you've made yourself visible until someone uses it against you. I still think about how it could have gone if I hadn't blocked him. If I'd kept replying to be polite. If I hadn't taken it seriously. It's not something I'll ever forget. And it's not something I'll ever let happen again.